All right, we'll call to order this special city council meeting workshop for our budget on Saturday, August the 14th, 2021 at 8:30 a.m. And quick roll call and certification of a quorum. I will certify we do have a quorum. We have Member Owens, Member Perez, Member Little, Member Orlando present in the chambers. I know Member Carbone is here. I think he's grabbing a cup of coffee. Member Hernandez should be pulling into the parking lot any second, and I have not heard from Member Camcar as of this moment. So we'll certify that we do have a quorum. Moving forward in our agenda, citizens' comments. We did not receive any citizens' comments online to speak online, and there's none that's been turned in this morning. So we'll move forward to new business item 1. Presentation overview regarding the fiscal year 2022 proposed budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor Cole, and thank you, Council. It is a wonderful time of year. We are going through our looking ahead for the budget for fiscal year that starts October 1. Today, we kick off our formal budget process, but as you know well, this is a year-long effort. You could mark back to February when we did our early input. We've also done work and adopted the capital improvement program. And then there's the ongoing surveillance and updates to the budget as we go through the year. But today we kick off the formal process that will lead to you adopting a budget at the end of September. And before we get into this, I'd like to thank the staff and the team again. These are Herculean efforts that are in large part done over and above a lot of the other day job things. And so it takes a lot of extra attention and time away from family and friends, and want to thank everybody. We have a number of staff here, but also just be a little cautious. There's other folks that are remote to different city buildings and monitoring in and taking note of things. So just to kick off, obviously we want to have a theme that kind of ties things together and buttons it up, and adapting to change is most appropriate. We've all been through the pandemic and the but not only that, but also weather challenges. We had a winter freeze, and then the couple of different hurricane threats that came in. Through all that, the team with your elected leadership has remained steadfast and adapting to all that. We never probably signed up or thought we'd be doing a vaccine pod, but we did that with success, getting 25,000 doses, and even getting the vaccine and finding that medical partner was a new trick that we learned, and we pulled that off, and we all go back to our training and flexibility to make that happen. Throughout all this, we are making sure that looking ahead for this next budget that we retain some of those skills that got us through the last year. Want to recruit and retain and support the best staff of public servants possible, and I thank them, and I know you do as well. So just starting out, big picture on the general fund, especially. So annual revenues, including the transfers, and there are significant transfers in here that we'll be talking about from intergovernmental federal monies, but that all exceeds operating costs. Once again, the general fund's fund balance at the end of this is projected to be above the new higher 25% policy minimum. And so we'll be formalizing that with the updates to the budget resolution when that comes to you in just a few weeks. So at the end, our fund balance is projected to be at 99 days, again, over the 25 target. I will note, and we'll highlight this, that we knew we wanted to include some things in this budget, but they weren't fully costed out. They have been. And so some of the numbers you'll see for expenditures on the general fund are up a tick from that, and so that's why you see that those hundreds on there. So the foundation of our operating budget is property taxes. It funds all of the debt service for the general fund purposes, with some minor exceptions, and a good chunk of our ongoing operations. Value is important for that reason, but also reflects the vitality of the community and the competitiveness and the attractiveness of that. And so once again, Pearland is reflecting a very competitive tax base, growing, attractive places that people want to come and invest and stay in. And so the value is up to $9 billion for taxable purposes, excluding the TERS. It's about 4% increase on this measure. And we received estimates as well from Harris County and Fort Bend that encapsulated this. And we also are navigating through the new changes with the state of Texas law as it pertains to SB2. And so that rears its head at a couple places in the budget process. So the budget that you're going to see is based upon that the worksheets that come from the state, and those are sort of a starting point for us. The Brazoria County Tax Assessor calculates those in accordance with state laws. There are two numbers that come out of that pertain us for this morning. One's a voter-approved rate that used to be called the rollback rate. That used to be an 8% max that triggered other things, and now it's 3.5%. The other piece of it is a no new revenue rate, and that is what the state formula says that the city would need to levy to collect the same revenues as last year with the exclusion of new value. And so both of those have been calculated, and make the point again that the recommended rate is below both of those once again. So derived from the property tax base is our property tax revenue. The rate that we set and we have control of is another decrease, which I think is notable given the demands on our services and the expansion that's required for a city of our size and the scale of our operations. And that's the second year that we've been below the no new revenue rate. It's $27 million in current collections to the general fund budgeted, and then $34 million to debt service. And I will say that when I joined the city team, one of the big policy questions was, the debt as a proportion of the total. As recently as 13 and 14, the debt was 71% of the levy, leaving 30% for operations. That's moderated significantly. FY22 is 45% for operations, our day-to-day services, which is another increase from last year. So once you have your base and you have your rate, then you have your revenue. And so this table you've seen for the last several years, it illustrates in the blue the 21 current, and then 22 is what we show for budget, and then the other two are those state formulas. And so with the 0.708 rate that drives $31 million, we have the TERS administration fee, which is linked to that. We did set the recommended rate to maximize the TERS admin rebate to us, and that's $13 million for a total of 44. And there you see those rolled together just to make it clear. So what's that mean for an actual property in the real world? We've had these examples, and I think it helps to put some more reality to the numbers that we have control. The far left, I'd note, that's just taking an example and slicing that for value that wouldn't change and what our rate does. So obviously a little bit lower rate gets you a little bit lower city portion of that. The total tax bill is about $4,500. And so you'll see consistently in all these examples, the city is about between a quarter and a third of the total tax bill. Property taxes in Texas, most of that goes to public schools and then county, et cetera, other special districts, but the city itself is about a quarter to a third of the total. And there's the rest of those examples that you've seen those in the transmittal as well. Then moving over to our other major revenue source for operations is sales tax. That's been performing extraordinary. We just got another number on Thursday. That month, again, is double-digit increase over the year prior. And so we've been appreciating that, and you've gotten those reports. We do caution on that, just the nature of this. Nothing is forever, but we think about this in terms of last year when it was the pandemic, and not necessarily for these last months, but the comparison is over for earlier months is over shutdowns. And then also the billions of dollars of federal stimulus money that are flowing to individuals has boosted household incomes, which is a great thing that's also flowing into these retail sales. So all that's cautionary note, but you can see that the numbers, even through July, is more with 2 months left to go than it was just 5 years ago in 17. And then the Pearland Economic Development Corporation, their operations are derived from a separate half-cent sales tax, and that's $11.8 million. And as I touched on at the very beginning, when we put the budget together, we knew we wanted to do the couple of additional programs, and one of those is a sick leave buyback. We costed those out. We did recommend the option 2, which was the lowest cost. The other ones really are not attainable for something like this to start out with, and that's been added in here. And then the bilingual pay also been costed out. We've also corrected the I believe it says, oh yeah, general fund income statement, and that reflects these new numbers. And then we did correct the water statement. That's the one. The FY20 had a problem with how we translated some of the enterprise operation over into that. No, that'd be that we did have that included. That's I think what you're referring to is the class and comp. And that's reflected in there. So this is a different sick buyback. And speaking of that, the classification and compensation, you've had a few different discussions on that. It's a significant investment to bring us up to the comparables and do that. But that is included in FY22. Proud that we're able to recommend that and bring that to you. That does bring the employees not only their 2%, but also the position adjustments and get them back in. And then also very pleased that we're able to recommend and bring to you getting a step plan for non-exempt positions. And I think that'll provide a little more certitude and a logic to a compensation plan for future years. When you do apply that, that comes out to 3.7 across all funds. 3.2, obviously, most of the employees are based in the general fund, and that's where that is. And so remember, that is included. And then the new one would be the $500,000 for the sick leave buyback and bilingual programs. And then noting too that we are committed to training and development of our staff. You know, we're going to have people doing these important things. We want them to have the best training possible. And professional development, which is a big category across all funds, is that 1.3. A big part of that, obviously, is public safety, police, fire, and emergency management. Into the general fund expenditures, most of our operation is public safety, police, and fire. Over half of the entire general fund operation, 56%. You can see that and how that's grown. We have last year, especially, council recall, we were into adding new Fire Station 8, and that mandated bring on people to staff that. And so we absorbed that in last year's budget. That this year's, the increases, the change is more modest in terms of the adds on the people that's necessary now that we've gotten that done. And then, again, more color on the public safety, just how that is broken out. And we have 3 new positions, 1 officer, sworn officer with the vehicle, and then 7 replacement vehicles just to keep up with that. And then the class and comp that's included when you put that to the police, that's 1.26 million. On the fire side, that's 1.3 million over there. But we're also doing training dollars as we come out of COVID, and we anticipate being able to do more in-person training. And then the existing training tower and 1 new ambulance and 1 ambulance overhaul. Not just looking at the numbers, our public safety services are obviously highly valued by the community. We just got the results of the biannual community survey, and once again, excellent and good results on resident perception of that. We'll be presenting that whole community survey to you in October. Something's moving. It's a little dizzying. The capital improvements here are, if we are in Pearland, we're building things. We've added, the last census number the most current census number came out yesterday, and 125,000 people and change. We've added another 30,000 people or something like that over the last decade, 100,000 people in the last 20 or 30 years. So, the people came, and then it is on us to build the roads and the water and the sewer system, the facilities to meet those. And that's been a big part of our work. The capital improvements, most of the high dollar amounts come in the water and wastewater system to meet the needs of today. And so that's $300 million paid separately by the users of the system. And very, very positive is that the low interest rate financing that we've enjoyed because of our credit ratings and familiarity in the market. Also, capital improvements pertain in mobility road projects. $61 million is included in this CIP that's here. Again, separately, you adopted that. Infrastructure maintenance is, I know, in the minds of the council as well as ours, and taking care of what we have. We have significant dollars in 22 for minor street rehab, sidewalks. We're in a good rhythm there. Mr. Robert Upton and the team in terms of contracts and routines for that, and deploying the monies that council allocates for that. We do note that we do set out for ourselves in the best of all worlds. We'd have significant more monies for maintaining our payment system and the rating system, but we make the most of what we have. In 22, some of the specific streets that we're looking at is Meadow Creek, Lee Lane, Abbey Field, Magnolia, Crane, Wood Creek, and North Fork. So there is a plan, and prioritizing those based upon payment ratings and other factors. Parks and Recreation also critical to our quality of life and attractiveness. People will go where they can see those kinds of amenities and green spaces, and especially during over the last year and a half, we've obviously noted people taking more advantage of that. There's projects that were in the voter-approved 2019 bond issue to recapitalize some of those park facilities. And again, trying to maintain those or mower replacements. Had great feedback on the Christmas tree lighting, and added fireworks to that since we couldn't do them at the 4th of July last year. We're keeping that in. It's a modest 15,000, but that's not taking anything away from the 4th of celebration of freedom. And then we really need to do something on the Centennial Park restrooms and storage there. Those are quite tired, old, and so we got an allocation there, and then replastering of an activity pool. The TERS is a big part of the budgeting here. That's Shadow Creek financing. Again, it wasn't too long ago we saw that as something far out and we wouldn't have to really think about, but the end of the TERS is in this decade, not too far out. But for now, the TERS value is about $3 billion, a modest increase. A lot of value is in arbitration hearings. The administrative fee that comes back to the city in lieu of a straight property tax rate is $13.1 million. And as I said before, we've maximized that to get the most out of that back to the city's general fund. The enterprise funds of water and sewer, we've got major capital improvements, but we also need in this budget turns to how we're going to run and maintain that, and make sure that as we experienced during the winter freeze, that we've got people that we can count on that are trained and know the facility and will be here for us to keep that system up and running. We all depend on water and wastewater every single day, and obviously a critical component of what we do as well. The enterprise from that then does require a 9% increase in revenue, pay for the primarily to get going on the payment for the capital projects that are well underway and will continue over the next several years. So that's a straight 9% increase that we didn't have increases last year. And we can go to advance the next. well, there's no slide on that, but shows last year going in with the new AMI, we had a 0% increase. So it's shouldn't be unexpected. It was in our multi-year that we'd need a revenue increase for this coming year. And then again, just like the TERS, another big piece of the budgeting this year is the federal stimulus. The cities across the country were fortunate to receive direct payments from the federal government from this rescue recovery plan. The formula arrived and $12 million just under to the city. Two separate groups. We got the first half in 21, and then another half. The rest of it is committed for next year, and we can use that and are recommending getting that in back to pay for us our eligible costs for the last year and a half, which affects positively our general fund balance. In this table, again, in the transmittal, Joel, who does an excellent job, Joel Hardy, managing all these with help, obviously, from finance and others. But this gives you a flavor for the different categories. Each of them have different purposes and restrictions and reporting requirements. But if you add up the total awards in 21 and 22, that's over $30 million for this. And some of these are, the regular, if you will, CDBG monies. You just allocated that last Monday. But then there's also disaster recovery, flood mitigation, other programs that we manage. So we'll close with just saying again, thank you for your flexibility with us and support during the last year and a half. And we're very much looking forward to whatever comes, but we will try to manage our destinies as best as possible. And the best way to do that is have a good, solid budget and work plan that you have to look forward to for the next few weeks. And I'll turn over to Eric and the team for going through the general fund, and then we'll turn back to you, Council, for some questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. We're going to be trying to thread the needle here today to give you just the right amount of information. Of course, there's going to be areas where you'd like more detail, and we're happy to provide that. We've sprinkled in a few slides throughout at the end of each fund where we can pause and take questions from the City Council. We'll answer whatever we can here today, and if not, we'll follow up in a memo as per normal. So jumping right in with the overview and highlights. First, this budget reflects the will of the people through their elected officials, the mayor and city council. We listen all year long. We listen to the feedback on the white papers, the strategic retreats, and we try our best to make the budget reflect those desires and therefore the will of the people. The strategic priorities the council set out, you all know them, you love them. I'm not going to read them here because it's quite a bit of text. But we take these seriously, and we're going to continue to further integrate them into the budget document and align our spending to them as we go forward. So these strategic priorities are really the vision for the city going forward. And then the second part of this are the objectives and key results that we're going to be rolling out in the fall here. We're going to start at the citywide level, and you kind of start small when it comes to this sort of strategic management, and you build from there. But these strategic results are what are going to be sort of the action steps to achieving that vision that the City Council and the Mayor have given us. So real quick, what is a budget, right? A budget's a policy document, it's a financial plan, it's an operations guide, and it's a communications device. It's a living document, it changes through budget amendments, but it is an enormously important document for city governments across the country. Our general fund is our main pot of money, if you will, and so we're going to probably spend the most time on it today. Wanted to get started with the highlights of what's new this year. So we have added some positions, and we've also done some one-time purchases. So starting with the senior office assistant for police, another police officer with their vehicle, which is reflected in that total cost. Some of that is that one-time cost of that vehicle. Adding an animal shelter attendant, adding some utility vehicles for police, and these are sort of like gators or mules for special events and things like that. We are doing some repairs to the existing training tower, as well as updating key card access at one of the fire stations for security reasons. We are then adding an asset manager into Public Works, as well as a GIS technician. We are improving cybersecurity. by adding log management software and vulnerability scanning software in the city, as well as becoming a little more strategic with IT and getting a new strategic plan process underway. For sustainable infrastructure, we're adding video conferencing into Fire Station 5 so that they can, be trained remotely. They don't have to go down to Fire HQ to be trained or be conferenced in, as well as adding a senior construction manager with the vehicle. Again, that total cost has that one-time vehicle purchase in it. This person will be charged to projects, but they kind of live out of the general fund. And then for welcoming community, we are buying some zero-turn mower replacements. The current mowers are getting pretty old. They're breaking down a lot. It's time to replace them. The fireworks for the hometown Christmas tree lighting is something that we did this past year because the 4th of July fireworks event had been canceled due to COVID. And we in the city council got a lot of good feedback about the fireworks in December, and we decided that bringing that back was a good idea. The Centennial Park restroom and storage upgrades are in this budget, as well as an activity pool replaster at the natatorium. For resilient finances, we are looking to improve our HR compliance and operations, as well as adding a payroll technician in finance. And then under trusted government, we are adding a communications specialist, a database administrator, another GIS analyst, and a records management program for the city secretary. This is sort of the second half of the Laserfiche investments that we've been making this past year. I also like to be transparent and talk about what is not in this budget, right? So the additional $3 million for street and sidewalk funding needed to maintain our current pavement condition index is not in this budget. That's something that we're going to have to work up to over several years. The $14.3 million, we received $14.3 million in the total list for vehicles that are eligible for replacement in the general fund. Can't fund $14.3 million worth of vehicles all at once, so you replace what's a real priority. There was $5.2 million in supplemental staffing requests. You just saw the highlights included the staff that did get funded, but there were an additional request for 25 positions in public safety, 19 in engineering and public works, 8 in Parks and Rec, and 11 in internal service departments. Those are departments like IT, HR, et cetera. And then finally, there was about $1.2 million in non-staff supplemental requests that were not funded. So the list of needs for expanding services and things that the city would like to do is always larger than the budget can fit, as you would expect. So this is what's not in that budget. This is a list of the new positions in the general fund. You can see we're adding 7.5 people. Some of these are charged out between two different departments, between two different funds. And that's why you might see a 0.5 or a 0.25 next to them, depending on what their ratio is between being charged to enterprise fund, if they're also working on water sewer operations, versus general fund, where they might be working only 25% of the time. A little update here on citywide staffing trends. The last few years, we like to bring this chart back every year. You can see that public safety, those numbers in the blue, are the majority of our staff here. This increases to 427 this year. You also see a little bit of growth in general government. You see growth in public works and, primarily in the enterprise fund. And then, you have your smaller sections like parks and recreation and community services as well. Sales tax revenue. You can see that we're budgeting to keep the increases we've seen this year, plus a little bit more. We expect, sort of, as the city manager was mentioning, to revert to the mean when it comes to what's normal for Pearland level growth. Double-digit sales tax increases don't last forever, unfortunately. This budget does not assume that they will continue all year. It consumes a conservative growth rate, but it does assume that we maintain what we gained in FY21. Looking at general fund revenue, again, the general fund, our biggest pot of money, you can see that property taxes are our number one source of revenue here in Pearland. This is increasing from $28.5 million to $31.8 million. A lot of this is due to new construction and growth and values and things like that. Sales tax, you see a slight increase. Again, FY21 is where you really saw a lot of increases. And in the budget amendments, we were coming back and kind of upgrading the budget for that. So that's why you don't see such a big jump between FY21 and 22. FY21 already adjusted for those large sales tax increases we've been seeing. And then charges for service are our third largest bucket of revenues in the general fund. Looking at the expenditure side, public safety, far and away, is our number one area where we spend our money, followed by engineering and public works and general government. And then we can also look at this by classification. Salaries and wages in every government across the country, this chart pretty much looks the same. Governments are a very people-oriented operation. It's just kind of the nature of the work at this time. And it'll probably continue to be this way for many years. So looking at your total general fund summary, this is a chart you saw earlier during the city manager's portion of this presentation. We're looking at having an increase at the ending fund balance, and we are going to bring forward at budget adoption this year an updated financial policy. The only change we intend to make is to update the minimum requirements per council's idea to that 25%. So you see that the budget here will mention kind of the 16.6%, but then it just refers to the FY22 policy minimum throughout as that 25%. So that'll be adopted along with the budget. We are looking to end about $2 million over that FY22 policy minimum. So this budget in the general fund, we are ending, we will add to fund balance. We will exceed our policy minimums. We have excellent Moody's and Fitch's credit ratings, and these have been recently reaffirmed. The structurally balanced budget, and it maintains our core services. Fee updates can be found in your budget book. In the proposed budget book 1, in the appendix tab section, pages 23 through 53, and we're happy to answer any questions about those. Moving on to property taxes. Proposed property tax rate. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a longer view over time. So this top line, O&M, operations and maintenance, these are the services we're delivering to residents and the property taxes that go to them. You can see from last year, we're increasing this about 1.1 cents. Over 2 years, it'll have gone up about a penny. Whereas on the debt side, that's kind of where the more cohesive story is you see that in FY20, we're at 0.43, then down to 0.415. Now we're down to 0.39. We'll talk about debt service fund here in a second, where this property tax revenue goes to, but over 2 years, we've lowered that about 4 cents. And in total, that ends up being about a 3-cent decrease from where we were in FY20. This results in sort of a shift in the balance between how much of our property taxes are going to debt service versus our operations. So in FY20, it was 41.1% of our property taxes were going to operations and maintenance, whereas in FY22, that's gone up to 44.6%. This is a snippet of the sheet that's in the budget document that shows what those rates actually translate to in terms of revenues. You can see the increase in property taxes here, via the general fund levy and that collections rate, that 102.5%. That's something that's spelled out by state law, SB2, and the counties calculate it. It's not something that we play with. So we were asked to use 102.5% as our collections rate this year. You can see we're adding our anticipated revenue from tax ceilings as well for a total of $31.38 million in revenue in the general fund, and a total of $38.9 million in revenue on the debt service fund from property taxes. You saw some specific examples of a couple properties that we track for property tax changes over the years and how they're affected. This is a more generalized version of that, where you can see that property taxes in general, when people talk about their property tax bill, The majority of it, over 50%, goes to the school districts. In this case, this one shows Pearland School District instead of Alvin. And then the city of Pearland is about 30% or so of their rate, but as well as Brazoria County, the Drainage District, the Road and Bridge Fund. All of these contribute to what residents see as their total tax bill, and Pearland is about a third of their total property tax bill. Moving on to the debt service fund. So we are proposing a rate of 0.392. This is down from 0.415 last year. And we are again committing funds from fund balance to bring down that rate so that we know that there's some frozen values and things like that that are going to come in. This is something we've done for several years now. So this is your income statement for your debt service fund. You can see this jump in total revenues. This is due to a refunding that we did at the end of FY21. But we're expected to bring in about $43 million in revenue. There'll be about $44 million in expenditures. Again, there's no reason to carry a fund balance here above any requirements or policy. So we're going to use that fund balance to lower taxes for residents. And you'll see that the funds committed, we've committed 4.3 in the past, 8.3 in the past, and this year it'll be 5.4. We will still handily meet our reserve policy and be about $500,000 over it. Update on the just sort of general debt trends over time. You can see here that they've increased a little bit in recent years and are projected to continue increasing and then start to kind of come down beginning in FY24. I think the more accurate measure, because knowing your total amount of debt is good, but you've got to put it in context of what is your income generating potential, what is your current income level as a city, your revenues. And for city governments, that's really your debt to assessed value metric. And so you see here on the right that, even despite debt sort of increasing overall for the next couple of years and then starting to level off and decrease, you see that debt to AV has decreased from 4.7% to about 3.3% today. So that's definitely headed in the right direction. And that reflects the growth of the total property values here in Pearland. So we just went through the general fund and the debt service fund. I am going to go out on a limb here and assume that there may be some questions and feedback from the city council and mayor. So I wanted to pause and spend some time on that.
Back to you, Mayor.
Questions? Who has questions, right? Yeah, so we'll bring it back over. Great presentation, Eric. Thank you very much for that. We'll bring it back to council and just kind of open it up for questions or comments on what we've heard so far. Yeah, we'll go in order. We'll start with Member Orlando. You have anything?
I'm still writing some stuff down, so
Okay.
I'll skip.
Come back. All right. Member Carbone.
Yep. Couple random questions. So the animal shelter attendant we're adding, do we anticipate any additional staffing needed for the new Sherry Coleman facility being open?
So I'll mention the request is for 2. We looked hard at trying to do that now, but 1 gets us going. It is a larger facility, so I wouldn't be surprised if we come back in the next year with another one, but we'll shake that down and look at that. But there is more requested.
The replaster of the activity pool, is that going to be a cost share with the school district?
Carrie?
Yes, sir. That is a 50% cost share with PISD.
Do we have that tracked as a receivable, or how are we looking at from an accounting standpoint?
I would say that until we bill them, it wouldn't be, but obviously for that, it's not right now, if that's what the question is. Okay. We haven't done the work, and so we give them the heads up and then complete the work and then tell them what it ended up being. I believe that's what the formula dictates, yeah, the contract.
Yes, that's correct. Of the total cost, they reimburse us for 50% of that total cost.
And I think the question was the 44,000, 44,000, that 54.5, that's the total amount, or is that our?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Was that the question? I'm sorry. Apologize. The total work is the 44, correct?
Yes, that's the total work. And we have notified them of upcoming work that's proposed in our budget.
Oh, 54.5. Yeah, 54.5. Yeah, okay. I saw the 44,000 for the zero turn. That's where I got the 40. Sorry about that.
On slide 35 with the staffing highlights, the half and quarter, I know you hit on it, Eric, but just to confirm that that's not due to timing throughout the year, that's due to allocation to other funds.
Correct. These are all full-time positions, and they are budgeted for the full year.
I guess on this slide, as well as a couple before, I mean, I know we were way behind on IT. Seems like we've got some large numbers allocated to IT this year, and then how these plans always work is they're going to come back and say, "Great, here's the plan for the next 5 years. It's going to cost you another $5, $10, $15 million." So, in terms of funding that plan, are we ready to commit the dollars, or do we have any estimates on what that cost is going to be once we get the plan in place?
I don't think we have any solid estimates of what that's going to say. Our last plan was 7 years ago, so technology's changed a lot in those 7 years. So even though we've done a lot with cybersecurity and those things, I think that it's the plan that'll really help us define what those are for the future years.
All right, that's all I had for now, Mayor.
Member Hernandez?
Had a similar question, I guess, on the activity pool. I was told there's going to be kind of a general memo on the rec center and auditorium coming out at some point soon, or I guess what I would like to see is I'd like to get a better handle of kind of the auditorium's overall performance, just to kind of see what the total that we're spending is, specifically also with COVID, to kind of see. I saw that we had memberships fall down, and we're trying to recover that on the rec center side of things as well. But what we anticipate growth being in memberships, as well as overall maintenance costs, things like that. It just seems we keep getting things for the auditorium, and then also on the question that Member Carbone asked about the cost share. Do we have outstanding receivables for the ISD right now as far as cost share goes?
Yes, right now we do have some outstanding receivables with PISD.
Do you know kind of offhand what that amount would be in total?
Approximately 300,000.
And so that's for work that's already been completed. They've been invoiced.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a timeline on when we anticipate those funds being received?
We are working closely with them to work through those items. We'll be meeting with them soon. We have notified them of some potential budget impacts for FY22 and anticipate, once we have some direction on those, setting up another meeting with PISD to talk about how we resolve the outstanding receivables and some direction moving forward.
Okay. And then, so from a recovery perspective on the rec center and auditorium, do you anticipate, a net loss again next year as we kind of come out of COVID? And do you know kind of offhand what you're anticipating there?
I don't know with the impacts of COVID exactly what the cost recovery will be for that facility. On an average year, we are roughly between 75, 80%, and sometimes up to 110% cost recovery. We currently have approximately 3,000 members. We are estimating conservatively, but if we continue in the direction that we're going right now, our average revenue just for membership sales will only be about $500,000 short of what it was on our peak years. So we're getting back to, if everything keeps going in the direction that we're going, we're getting back to that place of regular, 80% cost recovery.
Okay. And then keep asking all the questions. of you, Carrie. I'm sorry about that. And then for the Centennial Park restroom upgrades, that was a pretty big number there as well. It seems like, I guess what I was understanding, it's kind of a increase in capacity, or is that to try to get tournaments or something coming through, or?
Absolutely. The current building that's at Centennial Park right now is over 20 years old. It's definitely showing its age, and it only the stall capacity is very limited. And with the increase in number of softball tournaments that we have been seeing lately, and also the proposals moving forward to host even more tournaments, we need to increase the stall capacity for those restrooms. We're trying to supplement with porta potties, but that's just a temporary fix for those facilities.
Okay, sure. And this is kind of, I guess, a tongue-in-cheek comment on the $15,000 for the fireworks at Christmas. I would much rather see a bigger 4th of July celebration than, just have $15,000 extra fireworks for 4th of July. That was a lot of feedback that I got was, we want to see bigger 4th of July celebration. But I'm also fine with just having 4th of July and no Christmas fireworks and, say $15,000. So, yeah. So that's all I had for now, Mayor. As we get deeper in, I'll probably have some more questions. Thank you.
Good deal. Member Camcar.
Mayor, I've got a statement I'd like to read. Is that okay? And point of personal privilege, I'd like to put it in the minutes if possible. So first, to my distinguished colleagues, Mayor Cole and the council, it's great to see you on an early Saturday morning. To the staff, thank you for all your hard work and dedication in helping us get to this point. Without your countless hours of work, these important discussions would not be possible. To the general public, thank you for giving us some of your time on Saturday to talk about the city. I'd also like to recognize our city attorney, Darren Coker. He's not here with us today, but he's playing hurt after having surgery on his moneymaker, his thumb, so get well soon. But I'd like to thank everyone and tell them that this budget 21-22 process has been easy. I would love to say that, but it's not true. As a land development professional who routinely develops deals with budgets in the tens of millions of dollars and who has a working knowledge of municipal finance, I can tell you these things are hard. I give kudos to the members of this body who've done this for many years. The amount of detail and nuance has been staggering. I am thankful to the city manager, Clay Pearson, and the staff for indulging my countless stupid questions to help me get halfway up to speed. I am pleased to see the staff craft up a budget with a proposed rate of 0.70825 cents. This is 1.1 cents below the current rate of 0.72. And it is a far cry from where we were a few years ago in FY20 with the consistent rate increases that pushed the rate to 0.74 cents just a few short years ago. This budget includes important priorities like the build out of the new library on Shadow Creek Parkway, the build out of a new surface water plant, and makes important technology updates that will serve us in the days to come. At the same time, I have to ask, are we doing enough to take care of our internal stakeholders, as well as the external stakeholders, the citizens of Pearland? As I look back the past few months in preparation for this budget cycle, many things circulate in my mind. Plan for the future, defend the taxpayer, make investments, focus on priorities. I also believe you can't unring the bell. The representatives of the Pearland Fire Department have come to us several times in recent months telling us they are dissatisfied with their current pay and that the proposed adjustments are not enough. When the firefighters say they are disincentivized to promote to the next level due to pay compression, there's a problem. When our police officers come repeatedly to City Hall to discuss broken promises, unfair treatment, and bad math, I cannot unhear that. Can we please tee up example one? When I read the class and comp study presented to us earlier this year, chapter 3, page 5, and I'm going to read this for the record. In addition to assessing number of employees at minimum maximum, an analysis was conducted to determine the amount of employees below and above pay grade midpoint. The percentages refer to the percentage of employees in each pay grade that are above and below midpoint. This analysis, a total of 610 employees are compensated below their pay grade midpoint, which is 75% of all employees for the city. There are 197 employees compensated above the midpoint, which is 24%. I cannot unhear that 3 out of 4 employees in our city are below the midway point as compared to their peers in 15 similar jurisdictions. For these reasons, I cannot in good faith advocate for a budget that adds more employees to the city at the expense of loyal employees who are actively serving our city. This budget includes an additional 19 employees over and above what we have today, with only one first responder of the 19. As somebody with a home building and development background, I would not recommend to a friend to buy a bigger house until they can afford the one that they currently live in. The city has experienced a tremendous amount of growth in the past decade, but that growth is slowing while our headcount does not slow to match. I am not advocating never to hire another employee ever. What I'm asking for is a breather. There's a time to sow, there's a time to harvest, and there's a time to rest. This feels like a time to rest. We have pushed and stretched this staff across the city in numerous ways. With COVID, our Parks and Rec team and other staff went above and beyond to distribute over 24,000 doses to our neighbors earlier this year. Our Public Works team pushed themselves in frigid temperatures to man our water plants during Winter Storm Uri in February. And our police have been under endless duress and scrutiny since the George Floyd murder last year. The police have not been the only ones under scrutiny, but so have the pocketbooks of our employees. One simple example to illustrate this, please tee up example 2. According to the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, regular grocery items have gone up significantly, while the city is only offering at least a 2% raise. These are examples from July 2020, so month over month versus where we are in July 21. For the record, eggs up 24 cents from $1.04 to $1.64, equal to a 17% increase. Gasoline up from $1.78 to $2.75, a 97-cent increase equal to 55%. A gallon of milk up from 3.25 cents to 3.65 cents, up 37 cents to an equivalent of 11%. 1 pound of boneless chicken up 33 cents or 10% in value. Or a pound of sirloin, for the guys who like steak, up $1.10 or 12%. I cannot think of a better way to reward the faithfulness of the city by giving the employees wages they can live on. I will concede the possibility that we do nothing and just proceed in a manner where we've given the least amount of money to get the internal stakeholders to leave us alone. We have been down this road before. I'd like to read page 5 of the Olson & Olson report dated March 23rd, 2020. Although it's difficult to understand how utility billings management did not recognize a 28-day meter read that could cause problems with utility billing, all parties interviewed agreed that their lack of experience played a part. In July of 2018, when the formalization and standardization process was being proposed and discussed, utility billing manager Elizabeth Ayala had only been in her position for a few months, and assistant utility billing manager Arne Fulton-Drawn, had just been promoted to the position after having worked there on an interim basis for only a few months. Neither person had any significant experience in utility billing before taking these jobs, and both admit that they now, in retrospect, should have recognized the billing gap problem. They admit that the lack of experience at the time most likely played a part in the failure to recognize the impact of water billing. When Finance Director Cynthia Pearson was asked why no one with experience was hired to manage the utility billing department, she stated that the approved compensation for these positions at the time in 2018 was not enough to attract an experienced utility billing management candidate. I advanced the argument several months ago and still believe if we had fielded a reasonably competitive salary that might have been a few extra $1,000s, we could have saved millions in dollars in lost revenue and needless hours of rehashing a pathetic and frustrating situation. I think we have the chance before us to slow down the growth of government down for 1 year by freezing headcount, take a breather, reallocate those dollars to our loyal employees by giving them a raise that actually delivers for them and actually delivers for the families of the city of Pearland. Signed, Alex Kamkar, City Councilman. Thank you.
All right, Member Little.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank staff for putting together this great budget. I did this for a number of years at Continental Airlines. We had about a $3.5 billion budget, but we didn't have this level of detail. So I can relate to how much work goes into this, and I appreciate it. On the new hires for the Public Works, primarily for the Water and Sewer Department, the Reflection Bay doesn't come online until 2023. Why do we have all these new hires in for 2022?
Great question. We got a longer piece coming towards that. But I don't know if Trent or Robert, you want to start that? Sure. And we do have the enterprise fund a little bit later, but I recognize some of these are crossed, so we can address some of that now. I don't know, Trent, you want to do that or?
Yes,
I can let Robert go into the details.
Can we wait till 2023?
So I think the big piece is that we're under construction right now, and a lot of the instrumentation, the mechanics of the plant, and everything that's going into the plant, having those people on board as that is built to be consulted and work through those processes makes sense as we work through the final stages of the construction. So then when we go into testing in the latter part of the year and getting the plant up and running, they're a part of that as opposed to waiting to hire them the following year. Robert, more to add? Or?
Sure. Councilman Little, with regards to those particular positions at the surface water treatment plant, those are those technical positions that, as Mr. Epperson stated, is looking at all the technical equipment that is going in to operate, maintain, do the preventative maintenance. All those items are important to be done and have that knowledge base while that equipment is going in so that they know the nuances in and out and work with the contractor, work with the vendor that is installing them, and then being trained on it as it goes versus after it's all installed and then we show up. That's important and vital. Many other cities that I've worked with or worked for have done the same philosophy and have had great success to be able to maintain this valuable asset that the city's investing in.
I think one other piece to add there is that a couple of these positions are really going to be looked at and used across the entire water and wastewater system. So the mechanics, the preventative maintenance type folks, they'll not just work on the equipment at the surface water plant, but they'll be able to work on the pumps, the blowers, the motors, and everything at all of our water plants and wastewater plants across the entire system. We have very little capability in those areas right now, and with asset management coming on, we see a bigger role for that and being able to do more of that in-house and reduce some of the cost that we outsource there right now.
On the rehire, the new hire for a construction manager, will that eliminate a lot of the contractor dollars we're spending for construction management that we see as kind of a new recurring theme?
Yes, sir. That's the purpose of that, is to reduce again further how much outsourcing we do for construction management, which we typically pay probably 2.5 to 3 times the rate to outsource.
I share Councilman Kamkar's concern for the rate of growth of the number of employees in the city. In the last 4 years, the population rate's been 8%, but the increase in the number of employees has been 14%. I mean, we have millions of dollars. We spend millions of dollars each year in new software, and a lot of the justification for it is it's going to make us more efficient in managing the city. But we're not seeing that in the number of new hires that we keep adding. I'd like to see a comparable chart of similar cities like we do for everything else. It shows the number of employees per thousand, number of thousand per population, see how that looks. Can we get that?
I think I would love to, because I think it'll show we're below. The only thing I would say is with those percentages, if you put that staffing chart up with the different departments, the percentage, doesn't quite work for a straight year over year like that. Again, with Station 8, what was the number for that? We had to bring on 20 or 30 people to staff
About
that
30
station.
people.
30 people to staff at Station 1 Gulp there. So, and we don't have that for this year. So we'll get the comparables for the other cities. It'd be great to show.
I was going to actually ask on that too, just for some of that growth. Can we could even break out the fire department increases, because obviously that's kind of a non-continuous thing. But I was also kind of interested. It just seems like it seems like there would be more economies of scale in terms of staffing than what we're seeing. So just kind of to understand how that's comprised would be really useful.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Good deal. Member Perez?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to start off, dovetail with what Member Little had said. I remember us seeing a staff per capita chart in the past. I think I recall it being we being significant. I believe that there's that we generally are lower than the competitive cities around us. So I think maybe if we distribute that to council before this budget is adopted, we can kind of see where we are. If it can be broken down by department without a whole lot of effort, I think that would be great. But I think it'll highlight to us why the staff is needed. While we're talking about staff, obviously, I've been an advocate of trying to keep our our staff salaries competitive. Over the last few years, we've essentially averaged out a 2% COLA. I'll acknowledge that we're kind of bastardizing the term. We just want to make sure that we're keeping up with both cost of living and what our competitors are paying. But realistically, we're actually trying to do two separate things with that. What I would suggest, and this is not necessarily for this budget, and Clay, you and I had this conversation yesterday. I do think it's an opportune time to discuss this for future budgets. Let's kind of break down what we're doing for our staff with respect to a generalized cost of living adjustment for everyone, so that their dollar today can pay the same thing, their dollar next year can pay for the same thing that their dollar did this year. I think that's what we owe them, to make sure that their salaries have the same buying capabilities. But if we take a look at the comp studies, and this may be oversimplified math, if we look at the comp studies that we've done over this this period and average out, like, how much did the salaries increase per year from one comp study to the other, and say, hey, that's a competitive balance adjustment. If we think, hey, in the next 5 years there's going to be similar growth in the salaries, then we can use both of those formulas to say, how do we keep our staff at the same buying capability as they are this year with the cost of living adjustment? How do we keep them competitively balanced to our neighboring cities, so that we don't lose them to League City or Sugar Land or some of the other cities? And we can make those adjustments each year somewhat separately. And then, Clay, what you and I talked about is kind of, if we have this competitive balance adjustment that's allocated by department as opposed to by employee, then maybe each department has an allocation where they can say, look, I've got an underperforming employee. I don't want them to, I don't have an opportunity to advance, but I maybe don't necessarily need to lose them, but I can consider them replaceable. So I'm going to keep them at their same salary, but I have some flexibility in my budget to take an overperforming employee. They may not necessarily have a promotion in line because of the nature of some of the upper parts of our department, but possibly be able to get them to a point. It's like, I'm going to overcompensate them as a merit adjustment. So it's kind of a hybrid of what we've done in the past, where it was just completely across the board, everybody gets this, and there's no merit adjustments or minimal merit adjustments, at least done from this level, and something where council's really going through employee, and making arguments. I think listening to Monday's meeting and hearing the PPO president make the arguments he did about some of the employees not being appreciated, and if these adjustments are necessary. Obviously, I gravitate to those arguments. I really appreciate all of the employees, but to be fair to what he was saying, or in response to it, I don't know all of them. There's 800 plus employees, 900 plus employees. I can't possibly sit up here and give them, make an argument for a merit-based adjustment for each and every one of them, but the department heads can. And so I'd like to give, possibly for future budgets, once we've caught up with this budget, kind of give us the opportunity to look at both of those things, and give a little bit more flexibility with the departments to make the arguments that they need to be able to keep their high-performing employees, and maybe allow some of the other ones that we may need to replace, not necessarily give them an adjustment, but allow them to know, hey, everybody else is doing better, but you're not, and your salary's reflecting that, and let them manage a little bit from that perspective. I did share the kind of the concern on the fireworks for the Christmas ceremony. I don't think that's a necessity. I mean, I'm not going to cry over it's $15,000, but I kind of like Member Hernandez. I'd rather put the $15,000 in a grander 4th of July than do it on Christmas. I had personally not heard anybody come to me and say that they really appreciated it or wanted it. It could be that just nobody wants to talk to me, but it hadn't come to me, and I'd much rather just make one grander presentation. If we want to put $15,000 into maybe something more Christmassy, I can make that argument, but I don't think we need to spend, I don't think we need 2 fireworks celebrations per se. Forgive me, I had to get my daughter to send me my notes because I rushed out without them. With respect to the general fund, to kind of game plan for the following year, each year we generally do 2 mid-year adjustments. And in those mid-year adjustments, staff has come to us with some requests of things that we should purchase that were not in the original budget, but we now deem affordable because there's more in sales tax than was anticipated. There's more in property tax that's being collected than we anticipated. Other such adjustments. I think every mid-year adjustment I've seen has always been on the positive. I'd say that's guaranteed. I'd like us to discuss in this budget process maybe an automatic plan for what we want to do with those mid-year adjustments. My preference would be we use the additional money, we stick to the budget we have, we use the additional money to pay down debt. And that automatically we go, whatever additional revenue we get on the sales, at least with respect to the general fund, with the sales tax and the property tax collections, that goes directly to paying off debt more aggressively. I know that's a concern Member Owens has had about our debt load. I know it's a conversation we've had. Maybe that's a better posture and gives better direction for staff when these mid-year allocations come. If it's not for that, then if we don't agree to debt, then I would like us to try and spend it more aggressively on road and sidewalk repair, or actually particularly more road repair. Which brings me my other, I guess, question/statement. I'm comfortable with our allocation right now for the sidewalk, for sidewalk repair, as long as we're moving forward with a capital project to do all of the sidewalks, the gaps, and the repairs in a bond project within, I think 2024 is what we were targeting. So we can kind of confirm that we're still moving in that direction? Okay. I have some other questions with respect to the other funds, but I'll save that for that discussion. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Good comments. Member Owens?
Right. Thank you, Mayor. I too appreciate the work that goes into budget, and some of it into the wage aspects. This is my 17th budget at the city here, and 13 with the city of Houston. The reason I left the city of Houston after 13 years was because of the salaries. We went 3 years, almost 4 years, without any increase at all on there, and everybody got the same. And so I ended up and left. I didn't need but 2 more years to be retired from the city of Houston, but I gave it up to go out. So this is a critical part on there. And going through the budget book that I was looking at yesterday, I asked a couple of questions. One was on the water and wastewater and how much is that going to increase. And I understand now, listening to the presentation, that the rates increase about 9%. So that question is answered. When I go through and take a look at it in the budget process, it looks like that we have 19 positions that we're going to hire for this year. And that's what the request is, 19 positions for 22. And the salary and wages on 2020 actual budget was $59.9 million. In 2022, it shows to be $69.7 million, which is a $9.8 million increase in salaries and wages. And I think, that's kind of a little bit on the heavy side. And you go through and look at some of these in there, in that book one. And I come down and look at, let's just look at the car allowances. Last year budget, we had $95,000 in there for car allowances. This year, we're going to $155,550 for car allowances. The way that I perceive this is not for car allowance. This is additional money to an employee that you couldn't come in, give a merit increase or what have you into there. And so I think that's what that's for. It's not for the 35 positions for car allowance. I mean, if the vehicles, people come to work here at City Hall or what have you, and if they have to go into Houston, HGAC, or any meetings in Houston, I hate to say it, but used to we'd have a vehicle here that people could use, and it had the city emblem on it to where they could use that to go to a different location if it's under city business. So I think, that's a pretty good increase from 95,000 to 155,000. And I think that needs to be looked at as a reason why. Is it for somebody to drive, 8 miles to work and not go anywhere else and get a little over $4,500 for the car allowance to there? So I think, some of that should be looked at. And, but, if you're using your own car to go into Houston to meetings or somewhere else, we should have, I think, the budget for the fleet vehicles, that there's a lot more into it. And so, and if people are using them in police department, this is one example. We got 3, and we got in there with the chief and I'm sure the deputies. They get a take-home vehicle at the same time. And I hope those take-home vehicles are something, whether they're ghost cars or whatever, but if they have to get up during the middle of the night, go in emergency, I hope the lights are on there and the sirens on there. I mean, for that go-home vehicle. Just so happens here this past week, I sideswiped a car on 45 Frontage Road. Yeah, and it's my wife's car. It's been hell all week. But anyway, the police department, the guy come over there from League City was there, and we got to talk and matter of fact, spent too much time talking out there after we got through exchanging information. And I told him, I said, from all indications, we just lost an individual, a new hire, going to the police department in League City, where our salary was too low here, or not adjusted. And he said, I don't see how that happened. And I said, well, what are some things? Do y'all get a take-home card? He said, no. He said, I wish we could. I said, we do in ours, but I said, it's a good thing for us to be able to do that. We got the police department that go shopping or whatever, they use the car, and they, if you use 2 police cars and they're buying groceries at Kroger, nobody's going to come in there and try to rob the place. And he said, I wish we would be able to do that. We're very strict and we can't do it. And League City don't want to raise the budget this year, which there's been a lot of discussion about League City's budget and the low dollar amount in there so for this year. And I noticed in there at the same time, and this will probably go more into the water and wastewater side later on, but I see some new positions for people into the water, wastewater for the new treatment plant. I still say that one of the things that we need to do is to look at going on an outsource of running that plant. There's companies every day that runs these facilities. We don't run them. We haven't ran any. And we're trying to beef up and retire people, hire people to get in to do this. And previous experience tells me that if we get on a new plant side like this, that we have know nothing about, which I would say, you got to hire 1.5 times in order to run that plant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And to do that in case, you get one superintendent and the superintendent's running the plant and everything. If he gets sick or out and he's on 2 weeks vacation, who are you going to get to do that? So you have to have somebody take that position in there. These other people that do it for a living, they just take one off of one project and move them to another if they need another superintendent for a period of time. But we show, I think, 3 people in there this time. And the O&M for this plant, when it comes on in 24, I guess, 23, 24, we show an O&M of $2.6 million, I believe it is. And then the next following year, the operations and maintenance on it goes up to about $3.8 million. And so, I don't know where we trust those numbers coming from. If somebody gave them to us, but I don't think we have staff that knows how, that can come in and give us that as at that point of time. So we're looking at, when we open the plant and everything else, we got at least $6 million worth of O&M in a 2-year period of time when we bring it online. So I think that, and we've talked about that before, and that's one, even when I was off city council, I came up here and spoke one time, and it was on the freshwater plant to go to the outside and do that. City of Houston did it on theirs, on the southeast. Come out, they had the lowest bid. And so they're running a plant facility in southeast facility over there. But as a part of that, it was told that that's your budget. We'll treat you doing it just like any other contractor that we would have running a project and to do that. So I still think that, as part of that and the way it was discussed in the beginning, and probably Trent Epperson is the only one that's here, but he can tell you that we actually talked about going to the outside and hiring people to come in and run that plant facility on there. But, the questions I have, on there is most of it is back into salaries. We're looking at the difference in the salaries and everything of 9.8 million is what it says in our book. One for 19 positions in there to increase that. So that's the car allowance is another thing I got a concern about. $155,550. Is it really needed? It's for 35 positions, and it's roughly $4,500 per year on there. And is that actually for people to go into Houston, or is it, from the drive from Missouri City, Friendswood, Alvin, Manville, or something? Just come up here, and drive into the office. So I think some adjustments can be made on that as we go through. And but I think we really need to look at the positions you want to hire for the 19. I think we really need to look at the other areas in there that we can scale back. I think the bottom line is we know there's a need, and I'm just like some of the other people that's sitting up here, and we get calls from constituents out of the 125,000+ people that says, when are we going to do something for the people? When are we going to homestead exemption? When is that going to be increased for that period of time? And so I think, as a part of it, they put us in here to actually be their eyes and ears on this council and the budget's most critical time. So we're in a position now, do we listen to the constituents that put us into this position, or do we look elsewise and say that we just can't do it, but we still look at, raising a little over $9 million just for salaries. So
Okay.
that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Good deal. I did ask, remember Orlando, he said he's emailed his questions in, so
nice.
double back, so I appreciate that. And I want to go ahead and just continue to move on if that seems to be our, seems like we've gotten some good direction and feedback to staff.
If I can jump in real quick,
Sure.
I just wanted to note that the salaries and wages for the general fund are increasing 3.3 million, and it's about 800K in the enterprise fund total.
He's making the reference from 2020, not from the or from a previous year, not.
I just wanted to clear it up for anyone listening at home. That
Right.
it's not like we're jumping wages, 9 million in 1 year.
Appreciate
and one of the
All right, thank
things
you.
that I obviously we all have different questions, and I think it would be good to just continue to funnel questions into staff, and I think staff's doing a pretty good job of trying to encapsulate those questions and then get that feedback out to all members, which I think is good in budget updates or question updates along the way. Do you have another quick question?
Oh, no, I just wanted
Yeah.
to, the slide doesn't escape me here, that there's consensus. I hear from 3, maybe 4 members that the freeze of some kind, the 19 FTEs doesn't seem palatable. Between, I think Mr. Wardle talked about it, I think Woody has talked about it. Do we have the O&M deck? That slide with the rates on it? You mentioned the M&O with the debt service, the rate. One that you had like the 2 lines, you might have passed it. There you go. The O&M, which is like where we put the employees, that's going up. What I'm thankful to the team and the staff is the debt is going down, and I know we only move at consensus, Is there consensus to look at a hiring freeze, at least temporarily, so we can get more alignment? I know Mayor, we haven't received all the ARPA funds, which is a large amount going into I think we've, 11.8, and 5.9 is in the bank, and 5.9 is out in the government somewhere. But I'm very conscious that Darren always tells me we need consensus. And that's why I just wanted to understand, is there consensus to do the freeze?
I would not be in favor of that at all.
Okay, so that's one against.
I have other questions before I would fully commit to that. But Eric, real quickly, if I could, is there, do you, off the top of your head, know what the cost per percentage point increase on wages is based on what's proposed, the 3.3 that was spread over, was it 4.5 percentage point increase, or was it 5?
Before you answer that, I mean, I'd rather than do anything off the top of the head, look at it and report it back and
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not, if you don't know, then that's fine.
Let me get you accurate numbers.
Okay.
And I think the goal is we are already not paying the people we have to a wage that is reasonable. Costs are even outpacing the wage increase that's being proposed. That's very clear federal data. That's not Alex Kamkar's data. And so can we not take the breather for 1 year, actually pay these people an appropriate amount? And that's not police or fire, that's everybody. That's across the board, all the hard workers.
I think I would prefer, I hear the argument on the freeze. I also would like to hear, what is the actual proposal? I mean, if we're going to freeze, I mean, the 19 positions, what does that mean in an actual, I mean, we're proposing a 2% COLA. I guess the question would be,
Yes, sir.
are you proposing a 3%? Are you proposing a 10%? Are you proposing an 8%? What are you proposing?
Yes, sir. So on this big blue binder in the highlight section, there's two buckets. So there's equipment and there's salaries. There's 1.6 million across the salaries in the blue binder, and there's 900,000 in the equipment.
Right.
I would tell you, I think the people that work here deserve the 1.6 or some amount of that. We could freeze that, not hire. It's already in the budget, so we're not hacking away the tax rate down. We're just pushing it from box A to box B. We're not adding more headcount because, as Woody said and was already, all these people need COLAs eventually. They don't ever come off the roll, ever. And so my proposal to the mayor would be that 1.6 can be reallocated. I can be convinced on equipment to either spend the money on equipment, i.e. equipment for information services, teleconference, 20,000 here.
Right.
And so that would be I'm not trying to butcher the budget. I'm trying to just say, let's move the buckets around and we could be conservative, slow the growth of government for 1 year. Let's take the breather. Let's get the ARPA money. The $5 million is a significant amount of that budget. That's 1/20th of the budget. I mean, it's real money.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even have that yet. And we could probably adjust and pay the folks that we have a little more to get out of the situations where we pay poorly and we get a $6 million issue later.
Right.
Well-paid employees are happy employees. So that's my argument, and that's what I'm asking, is that we freeze the 1.6 in staffing and reallocate that into existing staffing. We're not butchering the budget. And for 1 year, let's take the breather. I mean, who's to say we don't reassess at the mid-year allocation? We go get more tax rate, sales tax, and we bring some of these people on. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I mean, we do that, something like that all the time.
Right. And again, I appreciate the more clarification on that. I think that's good. Member Little, I think you.
I couldn't support a hiring freeze, but I would support 50% reduction in the proposed number of employees and have that money go back into the pool to increase the existing salaries and wages for our employees.
Well, I think if the theme is trying to keep our employees happy because they're going to stay long term, they're going to produce better work. But salary is a component of that. But if you're making 4% more, but you're working 60 or 70 hours a week because you don't have support, that is the other component. We'll lose them to other cities that have larger departments, more well-staffed departments are actually growing. To be honest with you, we don't control the growth of government. The growth of the city controls the growth of government. As we continue to add people, and the census shows that we are adding people, per capita, we require more people to be able to service them. I would trust the department heads to tell us what their needs are. Having worked in a department that was understaffed and overworked, it's very debilitating when we went through a hiring freeze. At that point, there was mitigating circumstances because the economy had bad factors, and then the council said, look, let's just try and control the debt rate because we don't know what the economy is doing. But the work didn't stop coming in. People are still going to move to Pearland. We're still going to have to process permits. We're still going to have police officers that are going to have to go out and combat crime. We still are trying to get our response time from our firefighters down. There's still those necessities. So I don't think that we have frankly, we don't have the ability to assess what our hiring needs are to the department heads are. What we say and what we've told staff is these are our priorities from a budgetary standpoint. We want the value of the tax rate to go down a penny, which they did, and they were able to make make some of the hires that they requested and to get the salaries up, which means they met our metric. As you can see, staff had significantly more hiring requests that they didn't include. They just capped it to meet our general need. I think that's where our meddling into how the departments work needs to stop. Because what we end up with is, hey, we have a general hiring freeze. Well, we still have one person that's processing all of our payroll for 900 employees every 2 weeks. That person cannot take a day off. So we have a hiring freeze. Oh, well, we didn't mean for that person. Well, but that person's affected. We still have only so many people in the engineering department, the planning department that are reviewing all of the plans that come through. Let's let our department heads take the guidance we've given them with respect to the value of the money that we want, make the decisions that they need for their departments. And if it meets our metric with respect to the overall debt load, and they're not asking for anything that we think is policy-wise against the direction we're going, let's just leave it at there. Leave it at that. That would be my suggestion.
Real quick, Member Press, I think there's thousands of people who've decided that we get to decide the size of government. We all got elected here. They didn't elect us to just say yes, no, and keep moving. They elected us to use our intellect and to make this. I know, but at some point you're saying who gets to decide the growth of government.
But they didn't elect us to micromanage.
Okay, I hear you. I have to validate you. I'm learning this in therapy. I have to validate that you agree that we don't. So I'm going to validate that we're not going to micromanage. But what I would tell you is at some point, the people trust us to decide what is the size of government for what we can provide the services. What I would tell you is we're providing a misnomer that there's only one option, either hire all employees or the service doesn't happen. As Member Owens pointed out, and having worked with these contractors we can go hire a contract accountant to help us not be responsible for their COLAs and not keep them on the headcount forever and deal when we have these crisis, high leverage moments of busyness. We don't need to keep them forever. We went from 750 employees in 20 to now close to 800, and we're going to add another 19, and nobody's going to be able to discern what are these 19 employees doing more. I know that there's a book, but what I would just tell you is we have the ability to decide. I'm not saying to stop forever. As I mentioned in my written statement, I'm not saying don't hire somebody forever. What I'm saying is let's take the breather. Let's let the ARPA money come in. Let's take the 6 months. The dollars that we're talking about, we're not going to mess with the budget. We're going to go and say, let's move this number here into the salaries for the folks that need to be taken care of. I mean, everything is up 10%, and we're offering at our best maybe 4.5 or 5. Like, our people are still falling behind. And guess what happens? Those people, to your point, end up going to the place where they give the wages that are reasonable. It's simple math. So I'm advocating, Mayor, the 2.6 in the highlights is broken into 1.6 in staffing, 19 people, and $900,000 in equipment.
So what I would suggest, and I know you've got a question real quick, put this suggestion on the table. So we've had a suggestion for a hiring freeze. I haven't heard anyone support a hiring freeze the same way. I've heard maybe a partial or those types of things. We've heard some say no. We've heard some need more information. I think in our first budget workshop, I don't know that we're prepared to say yes or no to a hiring freeze. What I would suggest is I think we've given some feedback back to staff where staff has a little bit more work to do. talking about per capita, our employee base per capita versus other cities and peer cities. I'd like to see, that. How does this look? And if we did a hiring freeze, what would that mean to those departments who have requested these people? What would that mean in our service level? What would that mean in IT and cybersecurity? What does that mean to our vulnerability as a result of it? And what could that ultimately cost us by freezing those
long-range implications.
Right. So I think there's more to it than just saying yes or no to a hiring freeze today. So I think we've got a lot of questions on the table. I think we need to allow staff to get some of those questions asked and answered. Hang on a second, Member Owens. I want to go to Member Carbone here just a second. But I think we've got a few questions to get answered before we answer that question.
I understand. Yes, sir.
Member Carbone?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not hearing a consensus on the freeze. I'm fine at the next, kind of what you're proposing, maybe at the next budget. We give staff a chance to dive in. Let's look at the 19 positions, see how that affects level of service, see what we can cut. If we can hit on Councilman Owens in terms of what would contracting out the wastewater plant be, because that's a large number. And then also, there was some, and some of the comments up here, there was some midpoint and some other comments made. I don't think those comments were interpreted correct. So, I don't know. I hate making a rash decision. So I'd say if we can, I'm certainly happy to have that discussion with you next time, but let's have staff give them a chance to prepare.
Member Owens?
I just want to mention one thing, Mayor, and I think you were on council when we done this. When we were building out, the city was building out the west side, Shadow Creek and all of that, our inspectors was having to do an inspection every 7 minutes. And we made the decision that what we'd do, we'd go to the outside and hire a company to come in and support us. By doing that, whenever we completed that and got the number down quite a bit, then they went by the wayside, the contract did, and our city employees continued on. But it was so many things going on at one time that every 7 minutes they had to make a city inspection. And we made that decision to do that because we didn't want the reoccurring cost after we got it completed over there of having that on our budget of the number of people.
Yeah, actually, there was a given year, I can't remember the exact year, probably 06, 07 time period where we actually increased an inspector or two to the budget because of that. But when Pearland Town Center was coming online, some 800,000 square feet, we actually hired outside inspection, both permit review as well as inspection for the town center itself, so the rest of the city wasn't paralyzed by the town center going in at one time, and we could continue on with routine inspection of homes and those types of things without interruption. And so we did that. The permit fees that the town center tenants and whatnot were paid for that contract. And then when the town center was built, then that contract expired. So it didn't interrupt what we were doing. I think that's different than what we're talking about today. I wouldn't have a problem with looking at potential outside, but right now our growth rate just isn't enough to warrant doing that. Back in those days, we were well over 2,000 single-family building permits in addition to town center and probably 1 million square feet of commercial, all at the same time. So I think the circumstance there versus today is different. But nonetheless, I obviously want to make sure from the public's standpoint that if you're buying a home, a brand new, home, that it's been through the proper permitting and proper inspection, and and have comfort and can feel assured that our codes are being met, through the proper inspection, time frame. You got something real quick?
Yeah, just kind of in agreement with what you're saying. Like in that time that 06 to probably 12, where Perry Holmes was building a house a minute. we had large commercial projects coming on. We had and we do have Bureau Veritas, BBG, to deal with that temporary load, and we have other entities that can kind of do the construction inspection. We know that those are temporary. I think what to Member Owen's point, to kind of give him or maybe follow through his thinking a little bit. Do we have the capability of doing that for something that is a permanent installation like a treatment facility? Does it make sense for us to have a consultant manage that permanently? There is precedent for it, and I don't want to trivialize it because we do not have our own municipal trash collectors, and that is a permanent installation. We always go to consultants. So I think to his point, two separate discussions about hiring freeze and consultants for a permanent installation. Maybe that's something staff could look at. Is there precedent for it? Kind of what are the pros and cons to some kind of hybrid hiring system, and what does that mean to our budget? If we're bringing somebody on at that level as a consultant, does that mean a higher allocation per year? Can we do it without a full FTE for the consultant? There's a lot of questions that kind of brings up, and I think to satisfy Member Owen's curiosity, it's worth exploring.
If I could just quickly zoom out and weigh in here. Could we pull up the FY22 budget at a glance sheet? From the actual budget document.
The infographic?
Highlights, page 9.
Highlights, page 9.
Not the presentation from the budget.
Oh, right, you're right.
While that's coming up, and I want to keep on that, to dovetail with Member Owens and Member Perez on either outsourcing or whatnot, I don't know that it would be a bad idea to have us versus the outside bid it. Have the outside bid the O&M on the actual thing, as well as us looking at it internally and see what those numbers are. Let's make sure that we're getting a good look and feel for what would be outside versus us doing it inside, making sure that it's an apples to apples comparison. But this is a plant unlike anything that we've had on the ground. So I want to make sure that we are staffing it and budgeting appropriately. Not to say that we're not, but going to the outside and taking a look at that and versus the outside wouldn't be a bad exercise, I think, in the long term, to see how we do it. We may internally continue to manage and do it, but it would be good to see now that that's up.
Yeah, and appreciate you getting that up, Eric. So I think we say a lot, we're a people organization. I mean, this is the chart that really hammers that home. I mean, it's just salaries and wages dwarf everything else. And so I think I said that when we were talking about the comp and class study, like this is our budget in a lot of ways, like thinking about our head count, our salaries and wages. So I'm, pretty sympathetic to kind of the discussion that, that Member Little and Member Kamkar saying. I don't want to have a knee-jerk thing, and I think we need a lot more analysis. But it just zooming out big picture, we have to make sure that we can simultaneously control these costs while making sure we're taking care of our people. And I think the proposals to do that certainly warrant some additional consideration. So I'm in favor of that, want to do it in a thoughtful way. But yeah, we are our budget is a people budget, as we always say. So.
All right, let's, if we can, I think that's good discussion. Want to move on towards the next presentation, water sewer funds, the different internal funds. As always, if you need to get up and get a cup of coffee, please do so. But let's just go ahead and keep our discussion, moving forward. Great discussion so far and thoughtful. Thank you.
Let's turn this over to Mr. Eric Grosh to go start us through.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. So moving on to the Enterprise Fund. So these are our water and sewer operations. The Enterprise Fund, you often hear the term, government should run like a business. Well, the Enterprise Fund is run like a business. This is a utility model. It doesn't have anything to do with taxpayer dollars. It's all about the people who use the water and sewer end up paying for it, and it's supposed to be a self-sustaining system. So getting into the Enterprise Fund highlights, for For Safe Community, we have 2 message boards. We have a CCTV inspection system in sustainable infrastructure, and these are shared with the general fund. So you saw them earlier on the other highlights list. There's a cost split here, but this is the total cost, I believe, right, Rachel? Correct. So this is our log management software again, the IT strategic plan, and the vulnerability scanning software. That log management software and that vulnerability scanning software, you could also call it Safe Community if you wanted, because it's really about cybersecurity. Here is the staffing highlights of staff members that are in the FY22 budget to be added to the enterprise fund. Again, you see some splits where the charges, that database administrator in IT, for example, at the top there, their total costs we're expecting to be about $106,000 salaries and benefits. Half of that will be funded from the enterprise fund, half from the general fund, because they work half their time in the general fund operations and half the time on water and sewer operations. So we're looking at 10.5 FTEs here, about 970,000 in additional cost. We wanted to give you a quick update on the water and sewer system in general. So if you look at the number of accounts we've had over the long term, you can really see that growth in the city of Pearland that was exponential, one of the fastest in the country, right? We've leveled off since then. There are some large construction projects going on that'll increase this, but in general, you're probably going to see sort of that newer, more linear growth trend that you start to see with that 36,800 figure, and now we're at 39,484 active accounts in our enterprise fund. I wanted to give some historicals on revenue rate increases of when we've done them and for how much. Starting with back in 2007, there was a 25% increase. And then you can see between 2010 and 2014, there was a string of years of no increases. And then the city would do increases as needed. You saw 5% and 216%. And then we had sort of a low in 2019, 2020, and 2021, 0, 2%, 0%. We'll talk about this 9% a little more in detail, of course, here in a second. Again, the enterprise fund really is run like a business. That's where the business logic comes in. Sometimes staff will say, like, comparing business metrics to general government metrics on the taxpayer side don't quite work. This is much closer. It's a utility model. So no taxpayer dollars are used. It's a completely separate entity from the rest of our government. All of the revenue comes from water and sewer related charges and fees. We expect to receive $56.4 million in revenue total. Of that 54.4, the vast majority of it come from those water and sewer charges related to what people use. This budget needs to address Fitch's negative rating outlook that they provided to us for water and sewer bond credit rating. So this past spring, we didn't receive a downgrade, but they did give us a negative outlook. And their concern was that we have this increase in capital spending that's already occurred and is already underway for projects, but we haven't done a revenue increase since. Our response, right, is, hey, we had, cash equivalents in the bank that we wanted to spend on these projects. We weren't going to raise rates ahead of time on residents until we needed to actually raise rates. This budget is saying that it's time to raise rates, and we need to address Fitch's negative outlook comment as well. Raising rates would do that. That said, the FY22 budget includes a 9% rate increase to address these concerns, and it's needed to meet the ratios in the city's bond covenants. We've talked a lot about the ratios this year, and we'll continue to talk about them more and more because they're pretty critical drivers of what the rate increase needs to be now, and it will also need to be in the future. So you hear 9%, but what does that actually mean for the actual resident? So a residential customer with 6,000 to 12,000 gallons in usage, this is kind of your typical residential customer, no pools or anything like that. This is a $6 to $12 increase in their total bill each month. So that's what we're talking about, $6 to $12 a month here. Here you can see what the actual old and new rates for each meter size are. New rates, straight 9% increase from the old rate. A few of them were calculated incorrectly in the version you received in your budget book. We've corrected those here to make sure they're accurate. It should just be a 9% across the board increase. So the ones in red are the ones that were incorrect in your book. But we're talking, I think they were like $1 off or something like that. It wasn't much. Another part of the fee structure, right, is not just the meter size, but your volumetric size. So you have your water old rates and new rates there, as well as your sewer old rates and new rates based on the volume of water and sewer, water and sewer usage. And then here is the commercial and multi-unit volumetric old rates and new rates based on usage. We do our best each year to go out and see our other cities proposing rate increases to update these charts so that you have the latest information, so you're not looking at League Cities' rate last year compared to what we're proposing. So these do reflect all the ones that we could find. It's possible in the next few weeks it'll come out another city's looking at a rate increase, and we'll let you know if we come across those, or if you come across those, let us know. But we want this comparison to be as accurate as possible. So you see Pearland's current rates current total for what a residential 5/8 connection, 6,000 gallons of usage, pretty typical household, was around $73.58. Under the new 9% increase, it'd be $80.23. Pearland still kind of fits in the middle. I believe these are the same cities we used last year for benchmarks.
Eric, does this city of Houston, does that $83? Obviously, they have announced a 78% increase over 5 years. So I take it this is the first step in that 78% increase.
Let me double check on that for you. I think they were doing maybe a stutter step, and they've adopted a small, like 3 or 4% increase first. But I have seen the 78% over the next 5 years in the city of Houston.
Right.
Shoot, Mayor, these are going to be the rates as we know them to be as of October 1. So we tried, if there's anything that's come out that these cities are proposing, what they're going to be October 1, that's what we went with.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I know they're not going to raise 78% in 1 year. They've proposed it, and I don't know how they're stepping into that, but I want to make sure people are aware rates are going up around the city of Houston, not just us, but throughout. So I want to make sure.
Yes, sir. And we'll get back to you on that just to make sure it's clear what that number includes for the city of Houston. Continuing, this is another residential 5/8 example, this time with 12,000 gallons of water, so a little bit higher usage. You see Pearland was at 133. It's going up to 145. Still kind of in the middle of the cities here that we compare ourselves to. We also wanted to bring forward a commercial example. So this is a sit-down restaurant example with a 4-inch connection, about 260,000 gallons of water. So commercial institutions tend to use a lot more water, washing dishes, that sort of thing. You can see Pearland was at 3,500, and it's going to be going up to 3,900. Going over the major expenditures in the enterprise fund for these water and sewer operations. It's $1.1 million in supplemental request, $540,000 in replacement vehicles and equipment. Just off the cuff, the enterprise fund is a little bit better off with having newer equipment than the general fund is right now. It's pretty typical across cities that the enterprise funds run that way. So this $540,000 is less than what you see in the general fund, kind of reflects that. We spend a little bit less in the enterprise fund on vehicles now. We will be purchasing about $6.6 million worth of water this year, and we have $26.4 million in debt service this year in the enterprise fund. So when we talk about debt, there's general fund taxpayer-backed debt, and then there's enterprise fund-backed debt that gets paid back via water and sewer charges, and that's one of the reasons we have the rate increase today. There's quite a bit of other requirements listed, and we like to detail those out for transparency. So you have $2.5 million going to the general fund. The general fund, departments like finance and HR and IT provide services to the water and sewer departments, engineering and public works departments and water and sewer operations. And so this is a way to cover those costs fairly and make sure that the taxpayer is only paying for the services that are supported by taxes, and that the water and sewer users are paying for services supported by those fees. We have a $453,000 transfer to the debt service fund for, to the general fund's debt service fund. This is for a project from a long time ago that happens every year. This is a pretty stable payment. This year, the debt service fund MUD rebates are going to be about added to the total. This gets added together with what the general fund pays for MUD rebates to get at the total MUD rebate. So this $2.5 million is going to the MUD rebates so that those municipal utility districts can pay for the debt, which was primarily used for water infrastructure, drainage infrastructure, and sewage infrastructure. We have about $4 million in cash funding of CIP projects in the budget, as well as about, again, that $20.5 million in water and sewer debt service. You also see us moving the reserve from one fund to the other this year, so it looks a little weird. So there's $4 million that are going out of Fund 600, which is the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund, to Fund 601, which is the Water and Sewers Debt Fund. This is just the reserve. We're not actually spending it, but because transfers look like an expenditure, it shows up like that. The debt service fund is a relatively new fund, and so this is kind of the final step in us getting us established. And if we have questions about that, I'm happy to answer it. And then we have $600,000 being transferred out for property insurance, which is held in another fund. So looking at your fund summary here, you can see revenues going from 51.5 to 56.4. Expenses go from 65 million to 64 million. And we expect to end the year with about $28.6 million in cash equivalents. These are not the same thing as a fund balance like we would talk about with taxpayer funds, funded operations, but it's close. And these two metrics are really, really critical to driving rates. So the bond coverage ratio and the cash reserve ratio. This bond coverage has to be 1.40 or we break our bond covenants. And this cash reserve ratio has to be 25% or we break our bond covenants. You can see that the cash reserve ratio, we're still good there. But this bond coverage ratio, the 9% is what we need to get just up to 1.4. There's not any extra cushion in there. We worked as hard as possible to get it down to 9%. But doing that 9% increase addresses the negative outlook. It gets us to this 1.4 on the bond coverage, more importantly. On the right side, for transparency reasons, I'm not going to make anyone do math up at the board or anything, but you can see how we calculate those for the bond coverage ratio and the cash reserve ratio. One important note is when we calculate these, we take our water sewer operations fund and we take our water sewer debt fund and we total them up. So you have your total revenues because you have things like impact fees coming into your debt service fund that you don't have coming into the water sewer fund, and that revenue needs to count as part of this calculation. So if you're trying to run these numbers at home, make sure you use both funds. Here's your water sewer debt fund summary. You can see that we have about $30 million coming into this fund. Primarily, it's a transfer from your water sewer operations fund. And then you have about $26.4 million being spent this year out of this fund for principal payment, interest payments, and a little bit in there for bond issuance costs or other debt service costs that arise. We expect to be about $4 million over our expenses, but this is mostly a transfer of that reserve fund balance that we talked about. This puts $12.7 million in our reserves for debt service. This number comes to us from our financial advisors, and this is what we need to have in reserve for debt service. So your ending cash equivalents above this reserve for debt service is $374,000. Quick update on the outstanding enterprise debt obligation numbers. You can see that We have $486 million in current debt service requirements to maturity out to 2051. Moody's gave us an affirmation of our current ratings. Fitch said you need to increase your revenues. They wanted to see those revenues starting to come up to make sure that we're covering these. Moody's said the system's operational performance is solid with favorable debt service coverage ratios supported by annual rate increases and ample reserves. So these numbers can look really big out of context, but remember, this is a large government operation spread out through all the way through 2051. So you've got to have the context of behind these numbers. So that was the enterprise fund presentation, covers the enterprise operations fund as well as the enterprise debt fund. Of course, I assume there will be council questions and comments, so we will kick it back to you, Mr. City Manager.
Anything on that section, Mayor? Sure.
Yeah, real quick. Eric, go back the one slide to page 68 there, real quick.
Sir.
Okay. Do we know what our, I guess, I know a lot of the debt that we have sold recently through the Texas Water Development Board has been really super favorable rates. Do we know what an average rate would be in our water and sewer fund? And if we don't have that number readily available, we can get it.
I think we can do a little write-up for you on it.
Okay.
Is that all right?
And then secondly, so let's just assume we said no, we're not going to do the 9%, right?
Sure.
What would happen to our rates in the event we said no? Do what? Oh, I'm sorry. Stealing the thunder. Right. What would happen? I think it's important for this body to know, but I think it's also important for our ratepayers to know what would happen if we, and I don't know if we have that answer readily available, but I think that would be good to know in future meetings. If we said, no, we're not going to do a 9%, we're going to do a 5%, or we're going to do a no percent, or we're going to do, something of that nature. What would happen, not only with Moody's, but what would happen with Fitch? They've already given us a negative outlook. What would we happen if we didn't raise our rates? And then I know we've had a water sewer rate model done, and we kind of do it periodically. Were we anticipating a 9% this year? If not, what were we anticipating based on our rate models, that we did a year, maybe two ago, anticipating this year?
Yes, sir.
All I've got.
So for your second question there, around what if we don't do this, I think it'd be best if staff address that in a write-up just so we can have actual numbers and very data-driven response rather than my off-the-cuff, it's not great. The second question is, what were we expecting rate increases to be proposed at this year? So last year, the model said 17% would need that's your total revenue increase. I'm glad we've been able to get that down to 9% through growth and some other things we were able to do in the enterprise fund to make that a little bit more accurate. I want that model to be accurate in the future. That's not how I roll. I don't want to be throwing out 15, 20% increases so I can come in here every year and look like, all right, I got it down to 5. I want it to be, if it says 6, it comes in around 6, So we were looking at 17% for this year. It came in at 9.
And with regard to what happens if we don't, as far as the ratings go, the next step for Fitch would be to go down to a ratings downgrade. So that would end up costing us more money in interest rates. It's kind of like a hit to your credit personally. If you go to buy a car, then you get a higher interest rate when you go to finance. So we'll try to quantify it as best we can, but that's the mechanics behind it.
And because I think it's important like I said, I think it's important for us to know that, but I think as important for our ratepayers to know what that would mean in rates, in increased, debt service. At the end of the day, we have to pay the bill. We've got a lot of infrastructure on the ground, and we've got to pay for it. And I want to make sure that we obviously nobody wants to pay any more in their water and sewer rates than they have to, but also want to make sure that our credit ratings stay where we're getting, darn near 0% interest to, Texas Water Development Board. So, there's a cost to do that, and just want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. And we might even for the next, I know we can do a write-up, and we look forward to that, and I think that's the way we need to do that. But transfer that, then what would it mean in a slide for our public? If we didn't do this, this is what it would mean to you, in your bills in coming years. So, so with that, I'm going to go reverse order this time, if that's all right. That way, we keep everybody kind of equal. Member Owens?
Yeah, I only got a couple of questions here on this one slide. The debt that we have here, does that include the balance of the water, freshwater plant, the Berry Rose? If we do that, the Longwood, and also with the Hargrove plant, those areas there, is those numbers calculated in additional costs that we're going to be coming in or not?
Off the cuff, this does not include, I believe, Berry Rose, which is a large project in the CIP. We can get clarification of what parts of the CIP are already underway and that are included in this number and that we've sold versus what are new projects that haven't been started. Would that answer your question if we were able to get that to you in a write-up?
Yeah, that'd be fine. I just want to know what the impact is if we hadn't sold all the bonds yet for doing the other three projects here, and they're pretty substantial numbers. If we could see that, see what the total would be.
Yeah, I think it's my understanding we've sold all the debt for the freshwater plant. We've sold all the debt for JHEC, but we haven't sold the debt for Berry Rose and / Longwood plant.
I think that's generally accurate. There may be a little bit on the tail end of the surface water plant and some of the design work on Berry Rose that's been done, but we can get the exact numbers.
But for the fiscal year that we're talking about, this is what the principal and interest debt payments are for this fiscal year.
Yes, that includes all debt we've sold to this point, and therefore drives what our principal and interest requirements are for 22.
Right. All right. Member Perez?
Just real quick, so this is a total debt for water, wastewater as it stands right now?
Yes, sir.
On interest, okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Kind of in theme with what you were saying or what you were talking about before, I'd like staff to give us some understanding of the impact if we froze the rates up until the 3230 plan is complete. What impact that would have to us. My guess is the most significant impact would be a downgrade in our rating. Member Carbone may know better than I, but I think that a downgrade in the rating might be a quarter percentage point in the interest rate that we would have to charge. If that's a reasonable assumption, I think maybe to keep things simple, perhaps we could look at the next the bonded amount over the next 5-year CIP and say if we were at an interest rate of this value as opposed to an extra 0.25%, what does that mean to us financially over that period of time? And that may give us, it's oversimplified, I know, and I'm probably offending Member Carbone with how much I'm simplifying it. But maybe that gives us kind of a some solid ground to when citizens ask, hey, why are we increasing the rate when the 3230 plan is not complete? We have an understanding to where we can go back to them and say that the impacts are far greater. Or if the impacts are minimized and we feel like it's worth the risk to the rating, we can say, look, at this point, we want to hold the rate and deal with the loss in revenue and deal with the loss of projects that we can do over the next fiscal year or until the 3230 plan and be able to make that decision before we finalize the budget. To the same point that I had made on in the general fund, when we get to a mid-year allocation and we have collections and charges that possibly exceed what we budgeted, maybe if we're done with this budget, maybe we can have a discussion of generally what direction we want to give a staff. Again, my preference would be we have the money. Let's just put it to debt. Have that as a policy. Puts less pressure on the staff to try and figure out what to do with the money, and helps us to kind of attack an issue that we're constantly discussing. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to facing the public when they find out that possibly their water bill is going up 9%, especially after the fiasco we've been through over the last couple of years with the 3230. One of the largest expense items was the water purchase of $6.65 million per year. When the water treatment plant is completely online at 10 million gallons per day, how will it affect that number annually?
Robert, are you able to speak to how much will we still be buying water in the future?
I think there's a lot of ups and downs on that from our different sources, so it's probably something we need to take back and do some further analysis. I think in general, we'll reduce our water purchases from the 521 plant, the take point from Houston there. We probably won't change much from what we purchased from Houston Southeast plant that comes to our Alice Street plant. But then at the same time, we've got to convert our water supply contract for our raw water that'll go into our surface water plant to a actual water contract, which will increase the cost of that water. Right now, it's kind of at a reserve cost of around 20% of the actual cost.
Can we see those numbers at the next budget meeting?
So, yes, we can put together some numbers.
Okay, that's all I have.
Eric, real quick, does the rate propose, I know the rate model has all these different inputs.
Yeah.
Does the rate model presuppose any action on the 3230 plan?
The only thing that the rate model presupposes is the amount of backlog that we will be generating revenue from is, 3230, 2 extra days a month to eat into that backlog of how much we're behind. That revenue is built into the rate model, so it's currently being counted.
You're talking real technical here. So
Sorry, I do that.
That's fine. That's why we pay a lot of money. So the 3230 plan in this rate assumes that the 3230 plan is executed to completion.
Yes, it assumes it's executed as it's currently being executed as written.
So if we don't, I know that discussion is coming. That's a whole nother paper. I still haven't even read that yet. If we go out and we say, we're just going to drop that, forget it, everybody's cool, we're not collecting any more money, the rate's going to go up.
It would put pressure on the rates to go up, yes.
What does pressure mean? Can you be more definitive what that means?
So what would happen is it would reduce our revenue next year, which would play into that 1.4 bond coverage ratio most likely. To get up above that 1.4, we would have to then find revenue, probably through a rate increase or an expenditure decrease, to get above that 1.4 ratio.
We're squeezing the balloon then, is what you're telling me. If we don't go collect it today, we write it off, the payers of the rate, i.e. the citizens, are going to pay more next year over and above this 9%.
Yes, unless we can find revenue somewhere else or expenditures are lowered. But yes, that money is assumed to be coming in.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. This fund, like you said, is a business. So there's no other dollars. There's no magic, as Member Orlando likes to say, magic pot of money that we just kind of open up and we put. This has dedicated sources of people who pay into this fund.
Yes, sir.
There's not any other magic money.
No, we don't transfer in from taxpayer funds or anything like that.
Okay. So as we go into the discussion next week and finishing out the budget discussion, this 9% does not assume any changes to the 3230 plan.
Correct.
I sent you a couple of emails real quick. I just need a little more color on one or two items. Can we tee up Enterprise Fund page 8 out of the Green Book? There was some questions that came back that you guys answered, and I need a little more guidance.
Page 2 of the Enterprise Fund? Or page
Yes, sir. I'm looking for line 600, 305-100.5000.010. It's the top page of page enterprise fund. At least I'm reading it. At least I'm reading it, guys. I'm reading it. Not my first time reading it.
You're there.
Yep.
That's what this day is for.
I hear you. And I apologize to the team. I know we all want to go home. I apologize, just one or two small items.
No, this is all good. And I will say, okay, he's got it teed up. I will say,
Sorry.
Page 8.
the questions behind the scenes, the emails and everything else is exactly what staff is looking for, and it certainly helps these meetings move along as well. There you go.
And Mayor, we've been posting those up to our budget development
Enterprise
page
fund.
as well.
Enterprise fund. 600-305-100.5 thousand. It should have regular employees.
Right there.
There you go. You're on it. So, and we don't have the items that were the response, but I dug into this number because percentage-wise, it's a pretty big jump. You're at 496, 574, and then you essentially raise up almost $200,000, which percentage-wise is a large increase. The response that I got was engineering and public works staff are now shared across the administrative divisions. While there are no overall FTE increase, there is now an additional 1.5 FTE budgeted in this division. And then next bullet, increase in management level positions budgeted in this division. And then next bullet, total of 3 full-time positions. Can I just get some color on those 3 bullets?
Yes, so in fiscal year 20, there were only 8.3 FTEs budgeted in this fund. Beginning in fiscal year 21, there will be 12.0, and a majority of those positions are now management positions. There's the Director of Engineering and Public Works shared across that. We have an Internal Services Administrator that was added last year, and an Assistant Director of Public Works that is now fully budgeted out of this account.
So let me ask a follow-up question.
And then there are two additional FTEs, that GIS technician and the asset manager will be funded out of this.
Some of these people are in the highlights, the growing the government thing I was talking about. These are in that group of people.
Correct.
Okay. And this, I'm not smart here, this rolls into the water rate. This budget number pushes that 9% up. Those FTEs push. So in theory, I just want to reiterate this for the council's benefit, the public's benefit. If we do the freeze for a little bit, we're obviously going to probably have to get contractors. The water rate goes down. It's less money, right, Eric? Less money. We're spending less money, so in theory.
In general, if you lower your expenditures, you can hit that 1.4 ratio number without having to raise rates as much.
And you have to remember, I'm doing Aggie math here. Just understand, I'm not doing it to the highest level that you're doing it. So let me ask you a question. Scrolling down here just a little bit. So 600, 305, 100 dash or 0.54 of 160, the professional and contract services. The color on this was bullet professional service for on-call consultant for water, wastewater model services. Includes running scenarios to assist, verify developer modeling, minor updates to the model. This account also pays, second bullet, also pays for after-hour answering service contract. Can somebody tell me what that means in English?
Councilman Kamkar.
Yes, sir.
I'll be happy to answer that question. So there's 3 items that are in that line item. One is our after hours call. So we don't we man our phones 24/7, but we have a contract services that takes it up from when our employees are off their normal hours. So from 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock, our employees answer those phones. In the after hours, we have a call service that picks up those phone calls. And then if there's an issue, deploys our on-call staff.
Is this a Maytag repairman for the public's benefit? Is this just somebody that we call when the regular person's not working?
So when you call our phone number 1900, extension 652-1900, it rolls over to this after call service.
Okay, so
It's an answering service, not doing the work, right, Robert?
Right, it's an answering service.
It's an answering service,
And then
not to do
they
the
call our on-call staff.
Okay.
And the other 2 items as talked about with regards to the water and wastewater model, those are our on-call services with our water and wastewater model consultants to be able to run models as needed as we discover items that need to be addressed.
So just for the benefit, this isn't the person Member Owens was talking about that maybe we could hire as a third party. They come in, fix whatever we need to fix and move out. That this is not that role.
This is a consultant.
If we did what Member Owens advised, this is where they would go in this line item, most likely, or some other line item of professional contractual services?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it. All right. And then one more thing, and then I'm off, Eric. Can you roll to page 22 further down? And thank you again to the council for putting up with this. No comment. No comment. So on this item, similar discussion, year over year percentage 1.1 to 1.6. That is a large percentage increase. Even my simple math figures that out. Can I get more color on that just for the bullets? Public work construction merged with public works distribution and collection beginning in FY22. Next bullet, 12 full-time positions budgeted at $477,000 in FY21 became part of the distribution collections budget. Last bullet, 1 utility maintenance worker added to this division in FY22 at a cost of $48,000 and change in salaries and benefits.
Yes. So previously to this year, we had a Public Works Construction Division, which is 600, 305, 375. All of those FTEs and operating expenses are now part of the Distribution and Collections Division. So all of the salary and benefits for those 12 FTEs moved to Distribution and Collections, and then additionally, we'll be adding 1 full-time employee to this division in FY22.
So for the benefit, just real quick, so the next page is that construction page, and that's why
Yes.
it's not continuing?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, cool. So 2 departments come to 1 department, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then can I get bullets too on the 12 full-time positions, and then the person we're adding, the utility maintenance worker?
So the utility maintenance worker is going to be $48,356 in salaries and benefits. So that's going to be spread out across all those salaries and wages accounts, and so are the 12 FTEs. If you want the characterization of those 12 FTEs, I'll have to look that up.
I don't want to go that far. Let me ask you a question. How many FTEs do we use right now?
Already in that fund or division, excuse me.
Because when you say budgeted, I'm thinking that there's going to be more. There's not there today.
There's just 1 net add. So
you have 11 people now. And you're
So
going to
there
add
were
this another
20
one to get to 12. Is that correct?
There were 27 people budgeted in that division. 1 is moving to surface water treatment plant, and then we're adding the 12 from construction, and then we'll be adding 1 utility maintenance worker, so there will be 39 people in that division.
Okay. So right now, you only have 11 to add to the 27. So you have 38 people right now, then you're adding this 1 maintenance worker to get to 39, right?
Correct.
I understand we're combining. I still think this affects our water rate and how we're doing this. I don't know what a utility maintenance worker does. I've never been one, but I'm wondering, can we contract that for 1 year to figure that out and look at our rate? Because our rate is going up, and these nominal changes do end up adding up. So that's all I had. I'm not going to belabor the point, but thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, you got any questions?
I don't have any questions to add to what's been asked already. I look forward to staff's responses. I just have one, I guess maybe it is kind of a question, but this is from looking at messaging communications perspective. If we go out into the community and start trying to advocate for water conservation, I'm assuming that this is all revenue driven. So if we start pushing for, people to conserve water, that's probably going to have a negative impact, and then we would have to raise the rate even more. So would you say that that's accurate?
Yes, we like selling water, and at times that can rub against conservancy. But yes, in general, decreasing water sales decreases our revenue.
Sure. I mean, I guess maybe increasing. I would like to see a move at some point, maybe not now, but in the future, to increase. And I know that we're going to have increased transparency with AMI and everything once it comes online, but anything we can do to increase transparency, because I think as we do see increases in the rates, people are going to want to be able to justify that. for obvious reasons. And I think it's one thing to listen to these long budget meetings and hear all the capital projects and things that are moving forward, but I think they're just looking at their bill. So the more we can do to improve upon, clarification, people, transparency for the individual customer, I think that would be great. But I have nothing further to add to that. I look forward to your responses. Thanks.
Member Carbone?
Thank you, Mayor. On that memo we were talking about earlier about freezing the rate, if you can also touch on, I guess, the AMI implementation and back prior to all this, it was sold to us, we need these new meters so that we can catch a leaky toilet and catch the volume on some of those items. So if we can look at the volumetric side as well, because that's going to affect the rate, but that'll also affect the ratepayer's bill. And if you could go to slide 63, the way I'm reading this is, the proposed rate, that's going to put us at the highest in this area for any commercial account. And so, our small businesses we're trying to come out of COVID, are now going to be hit with the highest water and sewer around and potentially a drainage fee on top of it. And yet we want to encourage and build up the sales tax. So there's no, I don't know of a solution, but man, that's tough. I know the citizens elect us, but there's a lot of small businesses in Pearland that are hurting, and feels like we're kicking them when they're down.
Member Orlando?
Yeah, just a couple of things from me. I don't know if this is something we can speak to right now or if it's something that can be addressed in the white paper, but I guess I would just want to know if we need to bite the bullet and do the 9% hike. Do we have a fairly high level of confidence then that would, Eric, you said that'll address the concerns of Fitch? Do we have a relatively high degree of confidence that would remove our negative rating in the subsequent cycle, or there's too much it's too much of a black box to say that with definitively?
I have a good degree of confidence that seemed to be, and our CFO can chime in on this as well as our deputy director. But I'm fairly confident that is what drove the negative outlook, and that would remove it. At the same time, that particular rating agency has recently changed their black box model, so this is kind of the first year with it, and they don't always let you peek inside. But that was really their main concern, is the simple, hey, you're spending money on capital projects. When are you going to start bringing in revenue to pay for those capital projects?
Something that they did tell us was with general fund, when you issue GOs or COs out of the general fund, you increase the taxes to pay as you go. So you kind of move it along with the tax rate. But with the enterprise fund and the way that it operates as a business, you have to increase the rates a little bit ahead of when you're going to issue the debt. And so that was something I think that we had not previously considered. So you do need to stay just a little bit ahead of the debt you're issuing on the rate side. And because we didn't know that and hadn't been doing that, that's kind of where we got here too.
Understood. And that's actually a great segue into my next question. If we could pull up the chart of the rate increase percentages over time from the presentation. And forgive my ignorance here, but can we speak to, is there some kind of color as to just why it's so jagged? Is that really for political reasons, that from 2010 to 14 there, I'm not positive what was going on there. I have a little more insight obviously from 2019 to 2021. Is that, you would think, kind of to your point, we have this long range capital planning, and that we would be able to, if this was a purely financial decision and not affected by the fact that every single person in this city gets a water bill and we're sensitive to that up here, you would think this could be much smoother. And so I guess, could we speak to kind of the jaggedness of this, and then maybe how going forward we could try to have more regular rate increases that correspond with our capital demands versus whatever this is?
I think you've answered your own question to a large degree. I mean, it's what you said. And also, honestly, last year going into this with AMI and the volume piece of that that unknown, I think we're uncomfortable making predictions about what the revenue take would be based on that. So that would have been a double whammy, when it is more quote unquote accurate. But
I'm just thinking here of just like it's. I'm glad we have this 9% increase versus the 25% increase or the 16% increase. Certainly, I guess I'm just kind of wondering if, and I'll maybe go and calculate it. But what if you had the same rate increase every single year here? What would that look like? If you were taking the 3% in 2010 through 2014, then you probably don't have 16. You probably don't have 9 now. So I guess it would be my goal in the future to, even if, you're seeing fairly regular rate increases, that it's more, I think it's more of a shock to somebody. I can't imagine those people in 2007, they got a 25% hike. I mean, that sucks. I think we want to avoid stuff like that as much as possible.
You should have voted for it.
sounds like somebody did.
So I guess Clay says I answered my own question there. I guess just going forward, nobody wants to pay a rate increase. Nobody wants to vote to enact a rate increase. But I guess what we can do to kind of give more consistency to people and not hit them with these larger ones.
If I could, your point's exactly right. I mean, in the best of all worlds, you've got a capital improvement program, which is a big chunk of our work right now. And also, cost of business. I mean, yes, inflation was low, but chemicals, electricity, this is different than the general fund, whereby, we've got other costs outside that we can't control, inflationary. And so those are moving up. Maybe, there's a banking on the growth that was happening that 10 to 14 period, I don't know. But here we are now. I think your point is doubly true in that we have massive, relative to us, capital program we're well into and we cannot avoid. And so that bill will be coming due. So I think saving, not to get too much, I'm not trying to be argumentative or defensive at this point, that'll come later, but, trying to shave down that 9 at this juncture only makes it harder. It compounds years out.
Completely. And so I guess, and we have this is all kind of spoken to as well by the water model, right, that we just discussed on Monday. Kind of what's anticipated into the future. And then I guess kind of my final point then will be, and we had a discussion about this maybe in 2019, we kind of changed around the multiplier and the base rates for businesses versus versus individuals. But I have sensitivity. If we can go back to the chart that Member Carbone had referenced, that we're at the highest end of the spectrum, which is already troubling. But with this conversation that we're having right now, unavoidably, if we are going to be responsible up here, we are going to see rate increases in the future for, to make the investment that we need in this huge capital plan. And so I think we just really need to look at what are we going to do to keep this number especially sustainable for small businesses, because we are going to need continued rate increases. Like that's just, there's no, I'll say it again, there's no magic money thing. Like we're going to have to get the money through rate increases. And so especially here, I'm concerned with how do we make sure that this bar on the far right is not, 50% higher. And that's, I don't know how we do that, but just I think that's something we need to start thinking about now. And I'm sure it's already been a consideration.
Member Rollins?
I don't want to.
I'm not. Yeah, it'll go in a moment. But I wanted to kind of dovetail with what Member Orlando was saying. We have it in our ability to kind of control these things. We kind of deal with the budgets year to year. We make there are some projections that are given to us, but generally it's just kind of reported upon. We make we opine on them a little bit, but if we want, again, not necessarily to affect this budget, but give better guidance to staff, if we want to smooth out the jagged nature of those rates, we can provide some metrics for staff to kind of plan around. What they're doing is providing us a rate that equates to providing all the services that we've already voted upon in the past. And that's informed by the direction we had given to them in the past prior to that. So if we want to say, as part of this budget session, let's have a discussion of, do we want to cap the rate at no more than 5% at any given year for a period of at least 10 years? And that way we smooth it out. So we can go from 0 to 5 or 5 to infinitely lower if we want. But that gives staff the guidance of, okay, well, when you're developing your budget, we can't go after these capital projects in this budget year because we'll go over the 5%. And that may smooth things out and give us more comfort that we're controlling the rate, give staff more direction on what's the cap end of the metric. And I think we can do it this year, even though it's not directly related to this year's budget. We can make those, while it's fresh in our mind, we can make those determinations now, and that way they've got better guidance in the future. Because I agree, it's kind of hard for us to, and I've participated or listened to almost all of those discussions. And some of them were arbitrary and some of them weren't. No change to the rate over a 5-year period was because we were reacting to the Great Recession. You can argue some of that was political. You can argue some of that was just being responsive to our citizenry. But regardless, I mean, there was necessity to do that. But if we knew that, hey, once we get that rate, we're not going over 5%, staff can say, okay, we know how we're going to eat that elephant over the next 5, 10, 15 years and kind of plan accordingly. So I think maybe if we want to do that before this budget session, that's certainly something I would support.
Go back to the rate increases over time, that the jagged line. There you go. So, to speak to the 25%, go back in history, there had been a period of time where, to be honest, there was a flat line of rates, and it had been artificially kept down. But there came a point in time where you couldn't keep it down any longer. So the 25% increase had to get things to make sure that our ratings and all of those kind of things didn't get out of whack. It'd be interesting to know if you took this over time and somehow put an increase over time, where would we be today had we just, to go back to Member Perez's point, if you had gone back to 2007, whatever that rate is out to today, and just did a steady rate increase of 2% or 3% a year, would we still be at the same exact point today versus this jagged line up and down? And then it becomes a lot more predictable in the future. I'm not sure if we have the data to be able to go back and figure that. I mean, we're talking about a 15% or a 15-year, plus, window of time. But so some of it is in response to recessionary issues. Some of it's in response to just political whims. This is what we're going to do. And then at the end of it, it's like the city of Houston, the 78% increase is because they have arbitrarily, under lack of political will, kept their rates down. And they are having to increase because their system is at a point where they have to spend the capital dollars to do it. So I don't want to be in a position where we're forced to do that. I want to make sure that we're in a position to keep our system up to date, upgraded, where we're not having to emergency, if you will, build plants and those types of things. I mean, they have certain areas of their city they can't even grow in because they don't have water capacity to do it. I don't want to get to a position where we don't have capacity to add growth. I think it's important that we're ahead of that. At the same time, like I said, I don't like to pay any more than I have to. But at the same, I want to make sure that we can show that. Member Owens, you deferred to Member Perez there, which was shocking.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, I let him go. It was shorter than what I anticipated, but anyway. Yeah, this is just a quick question on our projects especially on capital projects that we're doing. In the past, I know that some of our staff that worked on those projects, their money or some of their salary came out of the bond issue.
Correct.
And is that calculated in here? I know that, when you have people doing both water, wastewater side and well, just take our deputy that he's over water, wastewater, public work, everything. There's a shared dollar amount within those categories. So the question is, anything on our freshwater plant, would that be something, since we sold the bonds, part of the salary will come out of those, the people that are working directly on those, maybe out of the capital projects there or the engineering department or what have you?
Yes, the work that is charged to those projects then come back in the form of debt in the debt service payment.
Yeah.
That is reflected in this rate. It kind of smooths it over time because the debt might be 20 or 30 years.
Okay, so those split and the salary types are reflected in this budget we got today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
Member Camcar, I think you had a couple of closing.
I think the discussion for Member Orlando just made me think about a couple other items. Eric, the driver on this rate increase you mentioned is they need to start seeing the revenue to justify all these capital costs and all that. How would you characterize? Is it really just they need to see something, or what would be the drivers necessitating that?
Yes. So the main driver is that 1.4 ratio, which
It's the debt coverage. Right.
When you look at the enterprise fund, it is a lot of it is debt service. The majority of it is debt service at this point in time. We don't have a lot of people there. There's not a lot of flexibility because we have a large capital program. At some point, right, that'll flip and the debt will be paid off. Because it's debt service, there's just not as much flexibility involved.
We need to drive that revenue number, is what you're telling me.
And so we need to drive that revenue number because there's just not a lot of what we call operating expenses, which is the other part of that one.
All right, let me ask a question real quick going off that. Are our users, I know you guys model and you look at back who's coming here, your population, the census came. Is the users coming online, is that pace slowing or increasing or somewhere in the middle?
It is slowed up from what it was historically, right, which was just exponential growth. And it's been around, I think, 2.5%, 2 to 2.5% the last couple of years. I think we're assuming 2.3% growth in accounts, 2.4% growth.
So we're coming off that sugar high of the big growth, so less users, and you've got to push up the number now. Let me ask a question. What if we go and we want to do 7% as 9 or go to 5 as discussed? What ends up happening on Fitch? Aren't we getting a lot of our dollars from TWDB now for these long-term capital projects around water? I mean, if I keep remembering, the water plant is a TWDB project.
I would just say that they're the bank, so we're still paying debt for that. It's just a cheap bank. We're paying 0 interest for 5 or 6 years, and then 1-2%, something like that.
And that's their goal. They want to go find credit-worthy borrowers. In some cases, they go to very rural areas, and they're not as credit-worthy, and they're just better than the other alternative. What happens if our Fitch rating goes one more level down negative? Does TWDB close the bank?
So we probably don't have a lot more big TWDB projects. We're working on getting in line for the Longwood / Barry Rose. I want to be cautious. I hesitated to say this earlier, but it's a bond covenant. I mean, there may be more implications than just quote unquote credit rating. So I don't want us to assume, well, let's take a hit on the credit rating. There could be, if you have a bank loan, right, you've got to, they have more power to come back and do things theoretically.
No. Well, just my overarching trying to understand the drivers is the Fitch ratings. I have a hard time saying to mom and dad or our neighbors, hey man, this is about Fitch ratings. I'm sorry. I don't live in that world, in that space. And I just don't want us as a city to be driven as that's really the concern. I understand there's covenants. I understand that there's rules that we say, but are we still bond compliant at 5.5%?
Not right now.
And I don't know the answer. We're probably going to do a white paper on that, or I would ask us to. What is that 5% number? But you know, debt service coverage ratio, I know that's a math equation. This is all math. And I'm wondering, what is the acceptable math? And right now, what I'm being told is the 9% is the acceptable math. I'm wondering, where can we live?
So I'll tell you that 100%, the 9% gets you the budget and meets the coverage for this recommendation. If we decide to tweak it and come in at 5, we'll have to make the adjustments and still meet those. But you know, that is another piece of math that we can do and run through.
Yeah, and that's the questions that I asked on the beginning of this, because all of this has a cause and effect. All of it has a cause and effect, and it's the effect that we're going to answer questions on. Yes, Fitch is a component of it. Moody's is a component of it. Selling water is a component. All of those levers make up this system. If, like, in the month of July, I would imagine our water not consumption actually probably went down. We had so much rain in the month of July, we probably didn't sell as much water as we anticipated because we had so much rain.
100%.
And so those all have levers that have a effect somewhere on the back end. I will say this, in light of this discussion, we've talked about the Berry Rose Longwood, plant discussion, and we've talked about the alternative that we kind of rolled out, a month and a half ago. I know staff is looking at the alternative, and what the alternative does, and I'll be brief with this, is instead of bringing on this additional $160 or $170 million of debt in a 1 or 2 year period, it takes it over a longer period of time. So what's being looked at right now is what that does to our rates in light of that, which I think is important in light of the discussion that we're having today. So at the end of the day, we have to increase our system. There's pressure to do that. We have legal requirements from TCEQ and other things, but there's a different way to do it. We can do all that debt in one time, or we can do it over, I can't remember if it's 10 years or 12 years or 15 years. And what that looks like, it's just a different way of doing and meeting the need of our community, but also meeting the legal requirements that the state puts on us in our system. So it'll be interesting. Hopefully we can get some of that rate back sooner rather than later in light of this discussion. And I know we're not going to get it in time for the budget, but it's a memory that when we do get it, it's important to know in the years to come what that's going to look like. So I know, Eric, do you have some wrap-up comments?
We've got a few more funds to go through, and
Okay.
but they're much smaller.
Okay.
Moving on to what we call our internal service funds. So our risk management, this is property insurance. Mostly there's some liability insurance in there as well, including windstorm. This pulls from other funds. So this is funded by transfers from the general fund and from your enterprise fund. And this is based really on, our insurance and values within those funds. So you just wanted to give you a quick update. We expect to be about $18,000 over revenue over expenses, about $18,000 to the good on the net. And we'll end with about $730K in assets in this fund. The medical self-insurance fund includes a claim total of $8.3 million and administrative fees of $1.4 million, we'll call it. The ending balance here will exceed the targeted fund balance of 25% of revenues by 11%, or about $1 million. So this fund is in a good position. And then there's some data on the bottom. I won't go through this about claims per employee and trends there that are important to take along with this medical self-insurance fund, and those are what drive these costs. Motor pool fund is something that is probably the newest of these, or it's not the newest of these funds, but has been a major initiative of the city the past few years. The purpose of this fund is to provide for the maintenance and replacement of the city's vehicle and rolling stock, right? You buy a vehicle, you start paying lease payments into it, and the idea is when you need a new vehicle, the money's there, and you don't have to go find it in your general fund. So getting back to that jagged line, this is one of those things that kind of helps you stabilize on the enterprise fund, but also in the general fund of what you're spending on vehicles each year. We're not there yet, right?
It's painful getting it set up.
Yes, sir. We are in the process of capitalizing it, as we like to call it. I like to say capitalizing, Mayor, instead of painful, but we're getting there. This does include $6.8 million from TERS reimbursements for the FM 518 project, 518. And those revenues will come in. We don't spend them all at once on vehicles then, because the next year you would have a huge spike in lease payments in your general fund, and that's kind of the opposite of what we're going for. So we'll continue to make progress in this fund, and it'll be self-sufficient once every piece of equipment that is currently in stock has been replaced once. Moving on to special revenue funds. There's a lot of these, so I'm only going to touch on one, but there's a summary, and of course we can answer questions on these as we go forward. The American Rescue Plan Act, this is kind of a copy of a slide from earlier, just to reiterate. This is a huge kind of extraordinary grant from the federal government that came directly to cities. That's kind of a new thing the federal government is doing. We think it's just great. We received $5.9 million in FY21 and we can utilize these funds a number of ways. We're using this to positively affect the FY22 general fund budget. So you see that money coming in, and we're using it on those one-time purchases and things like that. Just a reminder that budget amendment number 2, which we passed a few weeks ago, did move $1 million of that 5.9 into the FY21 general fund budget. So if you're trying to figure out like you're missing $1 million in FY22, it happened back in FY21. And then a note, the second and that final tranche of ARPA funding will be about $5.9 million. We'll be getting that during FY22, and that'll be the end of the ARPA money. Although we will take more if they offer it. To reiterate what the city manager said, we have a large amount of grants coming into the city. We've received over about $24 million in total awards in FY21. We're making great use and leveraging those to their fullest extent. Shout out to Joel and his crew and my staff who are keeping track of everything, as well as the rest of the finance staff who are keeping track of grants and all the reporting requirements. PEDC, just want to give you a quick update. Their beginning fund balance was $35 million or so. We expect them to bring in about $12 million in revenue and to spend about $26 million. Their ending fund balance is projected to end at $20 million. This budget includes $280K for bond payments to implement the Pearland Prosperity Plan. And it has these notes down here. There's a 288 phase corridor master improvement plan for $14.8 million, business incentives for $1.5 million, and State Highway 35 redevelopment strategy for $2.2 million. So we kind of just went through a bunch of the smaller funds all at once. Any questions on internal service funds, special revenue funds, PEDC?
Just quickly, I appreciate all the work on the internal service funds. I know that's something we're going to continue to build out. It was one of our council objectives that we set at our retreat, and I know that that there is continuous work there. But yeah, it's hard to capitalize those up front, but I think we're going to be really well served by that in the future for a lot of things, whether that's fleet, whether that's our streets and sidewalks. We have to make those. We know that those expenses are going to come up, and we need to keep building those out to take care of them over time. So thanks for covering that, and appreciate all the work to get those going.
Carbone? No. I had one general comment that, and Member Orlando just kind of made this a reference to it, but if I could see a better integration of the goals that came out of our strategic retreat in this, I would love to see how we're considering and contributing to those overall, just kind of get those in there. That way we have more opportunity throughout the year, and especially as we're building out the budget to decide if we need to adjust those. I think it just give us more to discuss along the way rather than trying to cram everything into, Saturday discussion. So, but that's kind of my overarching comment on that, but I appreciate it. I have no other questions. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, just one thing, Clay, what I mentioned over the phone, and I've had discussions with at least one other council member on this. I'd like us to begin a process to move the maintenance responsibility for some of the medians away from PEDC, or have a discussion with the council about moving the maintenance responsibilities away from PEDC for the medians, and then eventually 288, and have that into the as a general fund project. I won't belabor it. I discussed it with you as to why that's a priority for me. So maybe as part of this budget discussion, we can have a resolution on there where we can agree or disagree that we want to move forward with that.
I guess that would primarily be 35, and of course, 288 is the management district.
Yeah, so the portions of it, I don't think 288 is completely a management. I think PDC has some funded, but we've had discussions for probably 5 years now where these contracts come up, and there's been kind of a desire for councils, hey, is this what we intend for the funds for PDC to be used? Right. My belief is it's necessary for them to fund the installation of the beautification, but does the maintenance have to go into the general fund where PDC funds are used more for something that has some kind of ROI? So at least have a discussion. Either we agree to move forward as is, or we don't, but we put that kind of matter to bed. That's all I have.
Yep. Anything else? All right. I guess move forward. Is that wrap up? I guess
That completes my presentation, Mayor.
So Mayor and Council, thanks again. So just process-wise, we probably should add a slide, just the next meeting points. Budget meeting number 2 would be on the same Monday night as a council meeting. So we'll turn around and get to you that information, but then we have a budget meeting number 3 after that. So we've got a little bit of breathing space. We need to do a ton of work on a lot of questions from today, and we'll get that back out to you as we develop those. So thanks again.
Sounds good. As has been said by several of the members, to staff, great work in putting all of this together. We know we probably ought to quantify staff hours, and putting the budget together would probably scare us. But thank you for the work up until now. I think we've given you some good feedback and directions and questions to come back to us with. This is one of many budget discussions that we'll have between now and getting something approved. And so appreciate the time and effort up to this point. Also appreciate everyone being here this morning, doing this on an off-council night. I know it's taken a little bit of time away from regular routine and Saturday mornings, but I think it's worth the while, and we can dig in and have some time to do it. Monday night, we've got some good discussion coming up with our ad hoc group at 5 o'clock, and then moving into another workshop with our Planning and Zoning Commission. So I look forward to that. Enjoy the rest of your day, and with that, we'll call a close to this meeting at 11:23.